It is 3 in the morning. The world outside is draped in a profound stillness, a quiet that should invite rest, but inside your mind, a storm rages. The darkness of the room is no match for the relentless spotlight of your own thoughts, a frantic carousel of worries spinning without end. A deadline at work, a bill that needs to be paid, a conversation from yesterday replayed with 1,000 different outcomes. The future stretches out like a vast, uncertain landscape, and the past is a gallery of regrets and what-ifs. Your bed, which should be a sanctuary of peace, has become a prison, and you are trapped with the one warden you can never escape, your own mind. This experience, this wearying battle in the quiet hours of the night, is not just a personal failure. It is not simply a chemical imbalance or a symptom of a busy life. It is a profound state of dis-ease, a fundamental restlessness that echoes through the heart of modern existence. We have been taught to seek, to strive, to achieve, to accumulate. Our phones buzz with constant notifications. Our screens glow with images of lives we are told we should want. And we are conditioned to believe that peace is just one more accomplishment away, one more purchase, one more vacation. We seek solutions outside of ourselves, in a pill, in a drink, in a distraction, hoping to silence the noise within. But the relief, if it comes at all, is fleeting. The storm always returns, because we are trying to mend a deep internal fracture with external bandages. But what if this problem, this deep ache of being human, is not new? What if this very restlessness was recognized, confronted, and understood more than 2,500 years ago? Long before the endless scroll and the 24-hour news cycle, a man named Siddhartha Gautama, a prince who seemingly had everything, realized that material comfort could not touch the deepest roots of human suffering. His journey was not into religion as we often think of it, filled with dogma and gods to be worshipped. It was a journey inward, a courageous exploration of the mind itself. The path he discovered is not a set of beliefs to be blindly accepted, but rather a map, a practical, step-by-step guide to understanding why we suffer and how we can find a lasting peace, not by changing the world, but by transforming our relationship to it. This is an invitation to walk that path. It is a journey to explore the timeless wisdom of the Buddha as a practical tool for the modern soul, a way to find not just a good night's sleep, but a more optimistic, clear-eyed, and peaceful way to live. We are not here to escape from our lives, but to learn how to live fully within them, to find a quiet center in the midst of the storm, and to realize that the peace we so desperately seek is not somewhere out there, but has been waiting patiently within us all along. To begin our journey, we must start where the Buddha himself began, with a diagnosis. When a skilled physician seeks to cure an illness, they do not simply hand out random remedies. They follow a clear, logical process. First, they identify and understand the illness itself. Second, they investigate its root cause. Third, they determine if a cure is possible. And finally, they prescribe a specific course of treatment. The Buddha approached the dis-ease of the human mind with this same clear-eyed, methodical compassion. His first great teaching, the foundation upon which everything else is built, is known as the Four Noble Truths, and they follow this very medical model. The first of these truths is the diagnosis of our condition, a truth we must understand deeply if we are to heal. It is the truth of dukkha. The word dukkha, from the ancient Pali language, is most often translated into English as suffering. But this single word is too narrow, too heavy. It can be misleading. When we hear suffering, we tend to think of immense tragedy, of deep physical pain, of heartbreaking loss. And while dukkha certainly includes these things, its meaning is far broader, more subtle, and more pervasive. Perhaps a better translation is unsatisfactoriness, or dis-ease, or stress. Imagine a chariot wheel that is not perfectly centered on its axle. As it turns, even on the smoothest road, there is a constant, subtle friction, a persistent wobble, a vibration that prevents the journey from ever being truly smooth. This is dukkha. It is the background hum of incompleteness that pervades so much of our lives. It is the feeling that something is just not quite right, the nagging sense that no matter what we achieve, no matter what we acquire, a deep and lasting satisfaction remains just out of reach. To truly grasp this, the Buddha broke dukkha down into 3 distinct, yet interwoven categories. The first is the most obvious, the one we all recognize instantly. It is called Dukkha, the suffering of suffering. This is the raw, undeniable pain of existence. It is the throbbing of a migraine, the sharp sting of betrayal, the hollow ache of loneliness. It is the anxiety that tightens your chest before a difficult conversation, the fear that grips you in a moment of danger, and the profound grief that comes with the loss of a loved one. It is the frustration of being stuck in traffic when you are already late, the irritation of a critical comment from a coworker, the physical pain of illness and injury, the existential pain of growing old and facing our own mortality. This form of dukkha needs little explanation, for it is a universal language. No human being is exempt from it. It is the blatant, unavoidable friction of life. The second category is more subtle, and it strikes at the very heart of our pursuit of happiness. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change. This is the unsatisfactoriness that arises from the fact that even pleasant experiences are impermanent. Everything changes, nothing lasts. Think of a moment of pure joy, perhaps watching a beautiful sunset, sharing a laugh with a dear friend, or the triumphant feeling of completing a difficult project. Within that very moment of happiness, if we are truly honest with ourselves, there is often a quiet, underlying anxiety. It is the subconscious knowledge that this moment will end. The sun will sink below the horizon, the friend will go home, the feeling of accomplishment will fade. The pleasure we take in a delicious meal is wonderful, but it is temporary, and its passing leaves us wanting more. The excitement of a new relationship is thrilling, but it is tinged with the fear that it might one day change or be lost. We spend so much of our lives chasing and clinging to these pleasant experiences, trying to hold on to them, trying to make them permanent. And in this very act of clinging to what is by its nature fleeting, we create a unique form of suffering. The happiness itself becomes a source of anxiety because we know it cannot last. The higher we build our castles of pleasure, the more we fear their inevitable erosion by the tides of time. This is the bittersweet pain woven into the fabric of our joy. The third and most profound level is sankhara dukkha. This is the suffering of conditioned existence. It is the most subtle, the background vibration of the off-center wheel. It stems from the basic fact that we are composite, dependent, and fundamentally unstable beings living in an equally unstable world. Everything about who we are, our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, our perceptions, our consciousnesses, a conditioned process, dependent on countless factors outside of our control. Our body needs food, water, and air. Our emotional state is influenced by the weather, the news, the words of others, and our own biochemistry. Our very sense of a solid, independent self is, upon closer inspection, a constantly shifting collection of processes. Sankhara dukkha is the deep, underlying stress and vulnerability that comes from this lack of any solid, independent ground to stand on. It is the low-grade, pervasive anxiety of having to maintain this fragile construct we call me in a world that is constantly changing. It is the exhaustion of upholding an identity, the quiet desperation of trying to find security in a universe that is defined by flux. It is this deep, existential unease that often fuels the racing thoughts at 3 in the morning. We are trying to find a permanent foothold on shifting sands, and the effort itself is stressful and ultimately unsatisfactory. To illustrate the transformative power of acknowledging this truth, there is a famous story of a woman named Kisa Gotami. She was a young mother whose first and only child had died. Consumed by an unbearable grief, she refused to accept his death. Clutching his small body, she went from house to house, desperately seeking medicine that could bring him back to life. Some people turned away from her, others mocked her madness. Finally, someone, taking pity on her, suggested she go see the Buddha. She ran to him, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded for a cure. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "There is only one thing that can help you. Go into the city and bring me back a single mustard seed from any house where no one has ever died." Kisa Gotami was filled with a sudden surge of hope. A single mustard seed seemed like such a simple task. She immediately went to the nearest house and knocked on the door. "The Buddha has sent me," she said. "I need a mustard seed to cure my son. Can you give me one?" "Of course," the woman at the door replied. But as she was about to give it, Kisagotami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Has anyone in this house ever died?" she asked. The woman's face fell. "Oh, child," she said softly, "you remind me of my deepest sorrow. I lost my husband just last year." With a heavy heart, Kisagotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. One family had lost a parent, another had lost a sibling, another, a child, just like her. Every door she knocked on, every person she spoke to, shared a story of loss. The living, she came to realize, were few, but the dead were many. As the sun began to set, the profound truth of the Buddha's lesson dawned on her. Her personal, isolating agony began to dissolve into a vast, shared ocean of human experience. She was not alone in her suffering. Loss was not a punishment inflicted only upon her. It was a fundamental, inescapable part of life itself. With this deep understanding, her frantic clinging softened. She carried her son to the charnel ground and returned to the Buddha, no longer a woman crazed by grief, but a woman awakened to a deep and sorrowful truth. Her healing did not begin when her pain disappeared, but when she truly understood it, when she saw it not as her private tragedy, but as a universal condition. This is the crucial point of the first noble truth. To acknowledge dukkha is not to be a pessimist, it is to be a realist. In our modern culture, we are often encouraged to practice a kind of relentless positivity, to ignore or suppress difficult feelings, to put on a brave face and pretend everything is fine. But the Buddha teaches that this denial is a barrier to true peace. To look squarely at the nature of our unsatisfactoriness, without flinching and without judgment, is an act of profound courage and self-compassion. It is the necessary first step. You cannot heal a wound by pretending it isn't there. You must first have the courage to look at it, to clean it, to understand its nature. By acknowledging the reality of dukkha in all its forms, we stop fighting a battle we can never win. We stop blaming ourselves for feeling incomplete. We begin to see our own struggles reflected in the eyes of every person we meet, fostering compassion instead of isolation. We have now taken that brave first step. We have looked at the diagnosis. The next logical and hopeful question is, where does it come from? What is the cause of this fundamental disease? Having looked with courage at the diagnosis of our shared human condition, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness called dukkha, we now follow the physician's path to the second question. What is its cause? A diagnosis, however accurate, is incomplete without understanding the origin of the illness. If we only treat the symptoms of a disease without addressing its root, we are condemned to a lifetime of temporary fixes and recurring ailments. The Buddha, in his profound investigation of the mind, identified a single, powerful root from which all our restlessness and stress grows. This discovery is the second noble truth, the truth of samudaya, the origin of dukkha, and at its very heart is a force the Buddha called tanha. Tanha is a Pali word that translates as thirst, craving, desire, or attachment. But this is not a gentle, passive wishing. It is a deep, visceral, and demanding thirst. It is the insatiable hunger of the mind that is never truly filled. It is the engine that drives us, the compulsive energy that keeps us reaching outside of ourselves for something to complete us, to make us feel whole and secure. It is this very thirst that causes the chariot wheel of our existence to spin off center, generating the constant friction and wobble of dukkha. When we feel that internal ache of incompleteness, tanha is the force that whispers, if only you had that, then you would be happy. If only you could get rid of this, then you would be at peace. It is the driving power behind the restless thoughts that keep us awake at night, promising that satisfaction is just around the corner, if only we can grasp the right thing or escape the wrong one. To understand this powerful force more clearly, it can be broken down into three distinct forms of thirst that operate constantly within us. The first and most recognizable form is kama tanha, the craving for sense pleasures. Our bodies are equipped with sense, dorsauer, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and the mind itself, which experiences thoughts and ideas. Kama tanha is the thirst for pleasant experiences through these doors. It is the desire for beautiful sights, harmonious sounds, fragrant smells, delicious tastes, and pleasant physical sensations. In our modern world, this form of craving is amplified and exploited at every turn. It is the urge that makes us endlessly scroll through social media feeds, seeking the next visually pleasing image or entertaining video. It is the craving that drives us to binge watch another episode of a series, wanting to prolong the pleasant feeling of escape. It is the desire for the perfect coffee, the latest gadget, the luxurious vacation, the validation of a like or a positive comment. It is the constant background noise of the mind saying, "I want." This thirst promises that happiness is located in the next pleasurable experience. The problem is that sensory pleasures are, by their nature, fleeting. The delicious taste of the food vanishes as soon as we swallow. The beautiful music ends, leaving silence. The thrill of a new purchase fades, leaving the object as just another thing we own. Yet, because we believe the promise, we are sent on an endless, exhausting hunt for the next sensory hit, a hunt that never leads to lasting satisfaction. The second form of this thirst is deeper and more entwined with our identity. It is bhavatana, the craving to be or the craving to become. This is not just a craving for a fleeting pleasure. It is a craving for existence itself, a desperate desire to establish a solid, lasting, and significant identity. It is the deep-seated need to be somebody. This is the fuel of ambition, the drive for fame, status, power, and wealth, not just for the sensory pleasures they bring, but for the sense of self-worth they seem to confirm. It is the desire to be seen as successful, intelligent, attractive, virtuous, or even spiritual. We see this craving playing out dramatically on the stage of social media, where we carefully curate a public persona, an idealized version of ourselves, and then anxiously await the validation that confirms this identity. Bhavatana is the fear of being insignificant, the terror of being a nobody. It is the force that drives us to constantly compare ourselves to others, to strive and compete, to build a resume of accomplishments that we can present to the world and to ourselves as proof of our value. This craving is particularly powerful and painful because it attaches itself to our very core. When our constructed identity is challenged or threatened, when we are criticized, when we fail, when we are ignored, the pain is immense because we feel that our very being is under attack. We are clinging not just to an external object, but to an idea of who we are. The third form is the shadow of the first two. It is vibhava tanha, the craving for non-existence or annihilation. This is not simply a wish for death, but rather a powerful aversion. It is the intense desire to get rid of something unpleasant. If kamatana and bhavatana are about pulling things toward us, vibhavatana is about violently pushing things away. It is the anger that wants to destroy an obstacle. It is the frustration that wants to obliterate a problem. It is the desperate wish for a painful headache to stop, for an annoying person to leave, for an anxious thought to simply disappear. When we feel overwhelmed by stress and think, "I can't take this anymore," that feeling is vibhava tanha. We are craving the annihilation of our current painful experience. This aversion is just as much a form of thirst as desire is. It is a forceful, tense reaction to reality, a refusal to accept what is present, whether we are desperately clinging to pleasure or desperately trying to push away pain. The underlying mechanism is the same, a tense, demanding thirst that refuses to be with things as they are. This pushing and pulling is the very definition of stress. To understand the futile nature of trying to satisfy this thirst, imagine a person adrift on a life raft in the middle of the vast ocean. They are dying of thirst. All around them is water, an endless supply. In their delirium and desperation, they cup their hands, dip them into the ocean, and take a deep drink of the salt water. For a fleeting instant, the cool liquid seems to provide relief, but this relief is a cruel illusion. A few moments later, the salt begins to ravage their system, and a thirst far more intense, more agonizing than before, erupts within them. Now truly desperate, they drink more and more and more, each drink sealing their fate, driving them deeper into the madness of a thirst that can never be quenched. This is a perfect metaphor for tanha. Every time we give in to a craving, we are drinking salt water. The temporary pleasure of a new purchase, the momentary validation of a like, the fleeting relief of lashing out in anger, these are all sips of salt water. They seem to offer a solution, but they only reinforce the underlying habit of craving. making the thirst stronger and more demanding the next time it arises. This is the cycle of addiction, not just to substances, but to consumerism, to anger, to validation, to the very habit of thinking itself. It is crucial to understand a subtle but liberating point here. The Buddha did not teach that life's pleasures, a beautiful piece of music, a loving relationship, a sense of accomplishment are inherently evil or must be avoided. The problem is not the object of our desire. The problem lies in the quality of our wanting. It is the clinging, the grasping, the frantic attachment that springs from tanha. This attachment, known as upadana, is the belief that our happiness is conditional, that it is dependent on obtaining and holding on to these external things or states. The music itself is not dukkha. The dukkha arises from the sadness and craving we feel when the music ends. The relationship is not dukkha. The dukkha arises from the fear, jealousy, and clinging we attach to it. The problem is not the pain in our knee. The problem is the second layer of suffering we add by desperately wanting it to go away. This shifts the entire focus of our spiritual work. The goal is not to renounce the world or to become a passionless stone. The goal is to free the mind from the habit of compulsive clinging and aversion. We have now seen the diagnosis, dukkha, and we have identified its root cause, the burning thirst of tanha. We see that this thirst leads us to cling to people, things, and ideas, hoping they will provide the lasting satisfaction they can never offer. But why? Why are these objects of our craving so incapable of quenching our thirst? It is because our thirst is for permanence and security, but we are trying to satisfy it by drinking from a world that is, by its very nature, in a constant state of flux. This brings us to the very edge of the next great truth, a foundational law of the universe that we must understand if we are ever to be free. We must now look directly at the nature of the very things we cling to, at the impermanent, ever-changing reality of anicca. We have arrived at a critical juncture in our investigation. We have seen the illness, the profound unsatisfactoriness of dukkha, and we have identified its primary cause, the burning thirst of tanha, which leads us to grasp and cling to the world around us. But this leads to a vital question. Why is our clinging so problematic? Why does this constant reaching and grasping invariably lead to stress and suffering? The answer lies not in the act of clinging alone, but in the fundamental nature of the very things we try to cling to. To understand this, we must turn our attention to one of the most profound and essential laws of the universe, a truth the Buddha called anicca. Anicca is a Pali word that means impermanence, inconstancy, transience. It is not a belief system or a philosophical stance. It is a direct, observable characteristic of all existence. Like the law of gravity, it applies to everything, without exception. From the grandest cosmic scales to the most subtle movements of our own minds, everything is in a state of perpetual flux. A mighty star, which seems to us a symbol of eternity, is in fact a dynamic, violent process of birth, life, and eventual death, destined to collapse or explode over billions of years. A towering mountain range, the very picture of solidity, is being ceaselessly eroded by wind and water, its form changing over millennia. Great empires rise, flourish, and inevitably crumble into dust. On a more human scale, this law is even more apparent. Our own bodies are a testament to anicca. From the moment of our birth, we are in a constant process of change. Cells are born, they function, and they die, replaced by new ones in a ceaseless cycle. The face you see in the mirror today is not the same one that was there 10 years ago, nor is it the one that will be there in 10 years' time. Our relationships evolve and shift. Friends move away, love deepens or fades, family dynamics change. Our most cherished possessions rust, decay, and break. And nowhere is this truth more intimate and immediate than in the landscape of our own minds. Our emotions are like the weather, constantly changing. A morning filled with joy can give way to an afternoon of irritation, followed by an evening of quiet melancholy. Our thoughts are even more fleeting. They arise in our awareness, linger for a moment, and dissolve, like clouds drifting across the vast sky of the mind. Try to hold on to a single thought for even a minute, and you will see how impossible it is. Another one always comes to take its place. Every single component of our experience, from the physical world around us to the internal world within us, is marked by this indelible stamp of impermanence. Nothing is static. Everything is a process. The immense suffering of human life does not arise from the fact of change itself. Change is neutral. It is simply the way things are. The suffering arises from our resistance to this fundamental law. We live as though we can somehow be exempt from it. We try to build permanent shelters on the shifting sands of reality. Our minds are constantly engaged in a futile struggle against the natural flow of life. When we experience something pleasant, a moment of joy, a feeling of love, a taste of success or craving, our tanha kicks in and we immediately try to grasp it, to hold on to it, to make it permanent. We build a dam in the river of life to create a reservoir of happiness. But the river is always flowing. The moment passes, the feeling changes, and we are left stranded by our dam, now holding only the memory of what was, which becomes a new source of pain and longing. We suffer because it is gone, and we suffer because we are afraid we will never feel that way again. Conversely, when we experience something unpleasant, pain, sickness, loss, rejection, we engage in the opposite struggle. We build a wall to keep it out. We resist it with all our might, believing that our aversion and hatred can somehow annihilate the unwanted experience. This resistance creates immense tension, a state of internal warfare. It is like trying to hold a large beach ball underwater. It requires constant, exhausting effort, and the moment we lose focus, the ball shoots back up to the surface, often with even greater force. Our struggle against pain doesn't eliminate it. It adds a second layer of suffering, the suffering of resistance, on top of the initial pain. We are fighting a battle against the very nature of reality, and it is a battle we can never win. There is a simple, profound teaching that perfectly encapsulates this truth. You cannot step into the same river twice. Think about what this means. You go down to the riverbank and step into the water. A moment later, you step out and then step back in. Is it the same river, number? The water that touched your skin the first time is now miles downstream, on its way to the ocean. New water is flowing past you, water that was upstream just moments before. The river is a process, not a static thing. But the teaching goes deeper. It is not only the river that has changed, you have also changed. In the moments between stepping in and out, cells in your body have died and been replaced. Your thoughts have shifted. The sensory information entering your brain is different. You are not the same person who stepped into the river the first time. The entire universe is like this river, a ceaseless, dynamic, unfolding process. Life is a flow, not a collection of fixed objects. To grasp at it is like trying to capture the river in a bucket. All you are left with is a container of stagnant water, a pale imitation of the living, flowing reality. When first encountered, the teaching of Anicca can seem depressing or nihilistic, but this is a profound misunderstanding. In fact, fully embracing the truth of impermanence is the key to liberation. It is not an act of pessimistic resignation, but an act of aligning ourselves with reality, which frees us from the most exhausting job in the world, the job of trying to control the uncontrollable. When we truly accept that everything changes, we can finally put down the heavy burden of our expectations. We no longer need to exhaust ourselves by clinging to pleasure and fighting with pain. We can learn to swim with the current of life, rather than trying to build a dam against it. This acceptance radically transforms our experience. It brings a new richness and poignancy to our lives. When you understand that this very moment, this conversation, this meal, this sunset is unique and will never happen in exactly the same way again, you begin to pay more attention. You savor it more deeply. You are more present for it. The preciousness of life is revealed not in its permanence, but in its fleeting beauty. Furthermore, an understanding of Anicca fosters a deep resilience. When you are in the midst of a difficult period, grappling with pain or loss, the wisdom of impermanence is a comforting hand on your shoulder, whispering, "This too shall pass." It gives you the perspective to know that no state, however painful, is permanent. It provides the strength to endure, knowing that the clouds will eventually part and the sun will shine again. This understanding is the ultimate antidote to the anxieties that keep us awake at night. What is the racing mind of the insomniac, if not a frantic struggle against impermanence? We lie in bed replaying the past, clinging to regrets, wishing we could change what is already gone. or we project ourselves into the future, generating endless scenarios of what might go wrong, trying to control a future that does not yet exist and is inherently uncertain. Both are a form of fighting the river. To fall asleep is an act of supreme surrender to the present moment. It is to let go of the day that has passed and to cease striving for the day to come. It is to simply allow reality to be what it is, right here, right now. By observing our anxious thoughts and remembering that they are simply anakin permanent mental events arising and passing away, we can stop identifying with them, stop feeding them our energy, and allow the mind to settle into the deep rest it needs. A true, resilient optimism is born from this wisdom. It is not the fragile hope that only good things will happen, but the quiet confidence in our ability to meet life as it unfolds, knowing that all things, pleasant and painful, will eventually pass. We have now seen that the world around us and the experiences within us are all in a state of constant, unrelenting flow. Our bodies change, our feelings change, our thoughts change. This leads us to a final, startling, and perhaps most challenging question. If every component that I identify as me is impermanent, then who, or what, is the I that is experiencing all this change? Is there a permanent, unchanging self at the center of it all? A fixed captain on this ever-changing ship? To answer this, we must journey even deeper into the heart of reality, to confront the most radical of the Buddha's insights, the truth of anatta, of no self. We have walked the path from our diagnosis of dukkha to its cause in tanha, and have seen how this thirst causes us to cling to a world defined by anicca, or impermanence. We have seen that everything we can see, hear, taste, touch, and think is in a state of constant flow. This realization pushes us towards a question that is at once terrifying and liberating, a question that strikes at the very core of our identity. If our body is changing, our feelings are fleeting, and our thoughts are transient, then who is the I that is experiencing all of this? Is there a permanent, unchanging soul, a solid self, a core essence that remains constant amidst this relentless change? The Buddha's answer to this question is the teaching of anatta, and it is arguably the most challenging, most misunderstood, yet most transformative insight he offered. Before we proceed, it is vital to understand what anatta, often translated as no self, is not. It is not a nihilistic declaration that you do not exist, or that life is meaningless. You are here. You are reading these words. You are experiencing life. The teaching of anatta is not a denial of your existence, but an invitation to investigate its nature more deeply. It suggests that our deeply ingrained feeling of being a solid, separate, and permanent I is a powerful illusion, and that this very illusion is a primary source of our suffering. To investigate this, the Buddha provided a practical toolkit, a way to deconstruct our own experience into its component parts, a system known as the 5 aggregates, or the khandhas. He proposed that what we call a person or a self is, in fact, a dynamic interplay of these 5 changing processes. The first aggregate is rupa, which means form. This is the material aspect of our existence. It is our body, the flesh, bones, blood, and breath. It also includes the entire physical world that we perceive through our senses. We tend to identify strongly with our bodies. We say, I am walking, or I am sick. But is this body truly a permanent self? As we have seen with anicca, the body is in a constant state of flux. It grows, it ages, it gets injured, it gets sick, and one day it will die and decay. It is entirely dependent on external conditions like food, water, and air. If this body were truly me or mine, we should be able to command it. Do not get old, do not get sick, but we cannot. It follows its own natural, impermanent course. So, the body is a process we are experiencing, but it cannot be the permanent I we are searching for. The second aggregate is vedana, which means feeling or sensation. Every time one of our sense dorsi, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind makes contact with an object, a feeling tone arises. This is not a complex emotion, but the raw, immediate experience of something as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. You see a beautiful sunset, and a pleasant feeling arises. You touch a hot stove, and an unpleasant feeling arises. You hear a distant, unimportant sound, and a neutral feeling arises. Are these feelings our true self? Clearly not. Feelings are incredibly fleeting. They arise and pass away in moments. They are completely dependent on external contact. A pleasant feeling, if it continues for too long, can become unpleasant. A hot bath is pleasant at first, but becomes painful if you stay in too long. These feelings are more like ripples on the surface of a pond, constantly appearing and disappearing. They are too unstable to be the solid I. The third aggregate is sana, or perception. This is the faculty of recognition and labeling. When your eye sees a shape and color, perception is what labels it a red car. When your ear hears a vibration, perception labels it music or noise. When your mind has a thought, perception labels it an anxious thought or a happy memory. It is the process of making sense of raw data by filtering it through our past experiences and concepts. Is this perception our self? This too is a changing process. The way we perceive an event can change dramatically over time. An experience we perceived as devastating when we were teenagers might be perceived as a valuable learning experience years later. Our perceptions are conditioned by our culture, our language, our mood, and our biases. They are not a pure reflection of reality, and they are certainly not a stable, unchanging self. The fourth aggregate is sankhara, a complex term often translated as mental formations or volitional actions. This is a vast category that includes all of our thoughts, opinions, beliefs, biases, habits, desires, and intentions. It is the active, busy, fabricating part of the mind. It is the voice in our head that comments, judges, plans, and worries. It is the momentum of our mental habits. When you feel an urge to check your phone, that is sankhara. When you form an opinion about someone, that is sankhara. When you feel a surge of anger or a wave of compassion, that is sankhara. This aggregate is perhaps the one we most identify with. We believe I am my thoughts, I am my opinions. But as we know from our own experience, these mental formations are the most chaotic and unreliable of all. They are like a troop of chattering monkeys, constantly restless. Our beliefs change, our opinions shift, our moods swing. This turbulent stream of mental activity cannot possibly be the serene, stable self we imagine ourselves to be. The fifth and final aggregate is vijnana, or consciousness. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the basic awareness that arises when a sense organ and a sense object come together. For example, when the eye and a visible form are present, eye consciousness arises. It is the simple seeing of the form. When the ear and a sound are present, ear consciousness arises. It is the simple hearing of the sound. We often think of consciousness as a continuous, solid thing, a kind of movie screen, or a permanent soul that is watching our experience. But the Buddha taught that consciousness is also a conditioned, flickering process. It is not a single entity, but a series of discrete moments of knowing that are completely dependent on the other four aggregates. It does not exist on its own. It arises and passes away with every single moment of experience. A famous story brilliantly illustrates this deconstruction of the self. A wise sage named Nagasena was visited by King Milinda. The king, a sharp and practical man, asked the sage his name. "I am known as Nagasena, your majesty," the sage replied. "But this is only a designation, a convenient name. There is no permanent person or soul to be found here." The king was taken aback. "If there is no person," he challenged, "then who is it that wears these robes? Who eats? Who meditates?" He then pointed to his magnificent royal chariot. "Venerable sir," the king asked, "what is this chariot? Is the pole the chariot? Are the wheels the chariot? Is the axle, the frame, or the reins the chariot?" To each question, Nagasena calmly answered, "No, your majesty." The king was triumphant. "Then you are lying. There is no chariot." Nagasena smiled gently and turned the question back to the king. "Your majesty, is the chariot then something separate from all of these parts?" The king had to admit that it was not. "Then, chariot," Nagasena concluded, "is the convenient name we give to this particular assembly of parts. When the wheels, axle, pole, and frame are put together in this way, we use the concept chariot. But if we take the parts apart and lay them on the ground, the chariot disappears, though the parts are still there. It is just a name for a functioning whole." He then looked at the king. It is the same with Nagasena. When the five aggregates of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness come together in this particular way, we use the convenient name Nagasena. But if you investigate, you will not find any separate, permanent self that owns them. This insight is not just a dry intellectual exercise. It is the key to unlocking immense suffering. The belief in a solid, separate self, the ego, is the source of endless trouble. It is this I that feels proud when praised and wounded when criticized. It is this I that is consumed with comparing itself to others, feeling jealousy, envy, and arrogance. It is this I that needs to be right, that holds on to grievances, and that defends its opinions as if its life depended on it. And in a way, it believes its life does depend on it, because this fictional self is terrified of its own non-existence. Most of our anxiety about status, our fear of failure, and our dread of death comes from this desperate, lifelong effort to protect and enhance a phantom. To see through this illusion is to lay down the heaviest burden you will ever carry. When you see that the self is an impersonal, changing process, you take things less personally. The sting of criticism lessens. The need to be right softens. When you see that other people are also just a manifestation of these five changing aggregates, driven by their own causes and conditions, it becomes much easier to feel compassion and forgiveness. This deconstruction does not lead to a cold, meaningless existence. On the contrary, it leads to a profound sense of interconnectedness with all of life. You are not a separate island, but a wave in the great ocean of being. Your existence is interwoven with everything else. This realization fosters a deep sense of ease and freedom. Yet, for most of us, before we can experience this freedom, we must first become familiar with the current state of our minds. If the self is not a calm, rational captain at the helm, then what does our inner world actually feel like? For many, it feels like a chaotic jungle, filled with wild, chattering, and restless creatures. It is a place we must now enter to get to know the famous monkey mind. We have journeyed deep into the architecture of the self, taking apart the machine piece by piece. We have investigated our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our thoughts, and our consciousness. And in none of these places have we found a permanent, unchanging master, a solid I in control. For many, this intellectual understanding resonates with a feeling they have known their whole lives, a sense of inner chaos, as if no one is truly steering the ship. This direct, moment-to-moment experience of a mind that seems to have a will of its own, that refuses to be quiet, and that drags us from one thought to the next, without our permission, has a name in Buddhist psychology. It is called the monkey mind. Imagine you are standing in a vast jungle. High above you, in the canopy of trees, is a wild monkey. It never stays still. In one moment, it is swinging from a branch of the past, replaying an old mistake or a painful memory. An instant later, it leaps to a branch of the future, chattering with anxiety about an upcoming event or a potential disaster. Then, it is distracted by a random itch of physical sensation and screeches about it for a moment, before jumping to another branch, a snippet of a song it heard years ago. It is restless, agitated, impulsive, and seems to be driven by nothing more than whim and ingrained habit. This is a vivid portrait of our untrained mind. It is a mind that flits from one object to another without rest, caught in a relentless cycle of thinking, reacting, and worrying. This constant internal motion is profoundly exhausting. It is the primary reason why we can feel utterly drained at the end of a day where we have done very little physically. We have been running an internal marathon, chasing our own thoughts in endless circles. This is the very state that torments us when we lie down to sleep. The external world grows quiet, and with fewer distractions, the monkey's chatter becomes a deafening roar. It drags out our deepest insecurities, replays our most embarrassing moments, and paints terrifying pictures of the future. Sleep becomes impossible because the mind simply will not or cannot come to rest. The deep, restorative peace we crave is shattered by the frantic energy of this internal creature. The great tragedy and the source of so much of our suffering is that we make a fundamental error in identification. We believe that we are the monkey. We mistake the chattering voice of our thoughts for our own true self. When the monkey thinks an anxious thought, such as, "What if I fail the presentation tomorrow?" we don't see it as an impersonal mental event. We experience it as I am anxious. When the monkey screeches with anger about being cut off in traffic, we don't see it as a conditioned reaction. We experience it as I am angry. We become completely entangled in the monkey's drama, tossed about by its every mood and impulse. We are not the calm observer of the monkey. We are the monkey itself, swinging wildly through the jungle, believing its frantic journey is our own. The beginning of freedom, the first ray of light in this dense jungle, is a radical shift in perspective. It is the realization, you are not the monkey. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which the thoughts arise. Imagine the sky. On some days it is filled with dark, stormy clouds. On other days, it is filled with light, fluffy white clouds. And on some days, it is perfectly clear and blue. The clouds are constantly changing, constantly moving, but the sky itself is not the clouds. The sky is the vast, open space that contains the clouds, allows them to be there, and remains fundamentally unstained and unchanged by their passing. Your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, these are the clouds. Your true nature is the sky. You are the silent, spacious awareness that witnesses the drama without having to be the drama. To realize this, even for a fleeting moment, is to create a space between you and your thoughts, a space that brings with it an immense sense of relief and possibility. Our instinctive reaction, upon noticing this chaotic monkey, is to try and fight it. We get angry at our own minds. Stop thinking about that. Be quiet. I need to sleep. We try to suppress the thoughts, to wrestle the monkey into submission, to force it into a cage. But what happens when you try to fight a frantic monkey? It screeches louder. It struggles more violently. It becomes even more agitated. Trying to forcibly stop your thoughts is a futile and counterproductive struggle. The command, "Don't think of a pink elephant," immediately conjures the image of a pink elephant in your mind. This internal battle is a war you can never win. It only creates more noise, more tension, and more exhaustion. We cannot kill the monkey, and we cannot cage it. So what can we do? The path of wisdom offers a different approach, one illustrated by a simple parable. A person finds a wild monkey and, wanting to settle it down, ties a rope around its waist and chains it to a heavy rock. The monkey, feeling constrained, goes berserk. It pulls at the chain, screams, and thrashes about, creating a terrible commotion. The person realizes this is not working. So, they try a new tactic. They remove the chain and instead, they plant a tall, sturdy pole firmly in the ground. They tie the monkey to the pole with a long rope. At first, the monkey is still agitated. It runs around the pole, jumps, and tries to get away. But its world has been simplified. It can no longer disappear into the vast, confusing jungle. Its movements are now centered around the pole. Over time, it gets used to the pole. It learns the length of its rope. Its frantic energy begins to subside because it has a single, stable point of reference. It may still get restless, but it always has the pole to come back to. Gradually, it becomes calmer. This parable holds the secret to taming our own minds. The wild monkey is our untamed stream of thoughts. The vast jungle is the infinite world of external and internal distractions. Shouting at it or chaining it up is our futile attempt to suppress it. The sturdy pole is a single, chosen object of attention. And for this practice, the most reliable and universally available pole is the physical sensation of our own breath. The rope is our gentle, patient intention to return our awareness to that pole over and over again. The goal is not to eliminate the monkey's energy, but to channel it. We give the monkey a job to do. That job is simply to watch the breath. This approach is not one of aggression, but of kindness and patience. It is a process of befriending our own mind. When we sit down and notice the mind is racing, we don't get angry. We simply acknowledge it, perhaps with a gentle mental note. Ah, the monkey is active today. Then, without any fuss or self-criticism, we gently guide its attention back to the feeling of the breath entering and leaving the body. A few seconds later, the monkey will have wandered off again, lost in a thought about dinner or a memory from childhood. Our job is not to be frustrated. Our job is simply to notice that it has wandered, and with the same gentle patience as before, lead it back to the pole of the breath. We do this 1,000 times. We do this 10,000 times. Each time we notice the mind has strayed and we gently bring it back, we are strengthening the rope. We are taming the monkey. We are transforming a relationship of conflict into one of cooperation. We are training the mind to find stability and peace. We now have a new understanding. Our inner chaos is the monkey mind. Our suffering comes from mistaking it for our true self. The solution is not to fight it, but to gently and patiently tame it by giving it a simple task. This task, this practice of focused attention, is the cornerstone of mental cultivation. To learn how to do it skillfully, we must now explore the nature of that steadying rope and the art of holding it. We must explore the practice known as sati, or mindfulness. We have met the restless monkey in our mind and have seen the futility of trying to fight it into submission. The path of wisdom, we learned, is not to cage the monkey, but to gently tame it. This is done by giving it a job, a single sturdy pole to hold onto amidst the chaos of the jungle. But what is the nature of this taming? What is the skill we must cultivate to hold the rope, to guide the mind back to its post, not with force, but with gentle persistence? The answer lies in the practice of sati, a word from the ancient Pali language that we translate today as mindfulness. If the monkey mind is the problem, mindfulness is the solution. It is the essential skill for cultivating a calm, clear, and compassionate mind. So, what is mindfulness? The term has become popular, and its meaning can sometimes seem vague. In its purest form, mindfulness is remarkably simple. The most widely used definition describes it as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack these three crucial components. First, on purpose. This means mindfulness is an intentional act. It is the opposite of being on autopilot. Most of our lives are lived in a state of distraction, our minds carried away by currents of thought without our consent. Mindfulness is the deliberate choice to place our awareness on something specific, to consciously direct our attention rather than letting it run wild. Second, in the present moment. The monkey mind lives almost exclusively in two places, the past and the future. It obsesses over what has already happened, replaying regrets and resentments, or it anxiously rehearses what is yet to come, spinning fantasies of triumph or disaster. Both are illusions. The past is a memory, and the future is a projection. The only place where life is actually happening is right here, right now. Mindfulness is the practice of returning our awareness to the reality of this present moment, to what is actually occurring. The third component is perhaps the most important and the most challenging, non-judgmentally. This is the quality of heart that transforms mindfulness from a simple concentration exercise into a profound practice of healing. It means we observe our experience, whatever it may be, without labeling it as good or bad, right or wrong. We simply allow it to be as it is. When a pleasant feeling arises, we notice it without clinging to it. When an unpleasant feeling arises, we notice it without pushing it away. When a critical thought appears in the mind, we notice it as just a thought, without believing it or condemning ourselves for having it. This non-judgmental acceptance is a radical act of kindness towards ourselves. It creates a safe space within our own minds where our experience can unfold without the added layer of our own harsh criticism. It is vital to distinguish mindfulness from thinking. Our society values thinking above all else, but in this context, they are very different processes. Thinking involves analyzing, interpreting, creating stories, and getting lost in concepts. It is the activity of the monkey. For example, you are drinking a cup of tea, and the thinking mind says, "This tea is nice, but it's a bit too cool. I should have drunk it faster. The one I had last week was better. I wonder if that cafe is still open. I have so much to do today. I shouldn't be sitting here." This is the internal chatter that pulls us away from our direct experience. Mindfulness, on the other hand, is the direct, non-conceptual awareness of the experience itself. A mindful experience of drinking tea would be noticing the warmth of the cup in your hands, seeing the color of the tea, smelling its aroma, feeling the sensation of the warm liquid entering your mouth, and tasting its flavor on your tongue. Mindfulness is not the story about the tea. It is the direct experience of the tea itself. The goal is not to stop thinking that is impossible, but to become aware of our thoughts as just thoughts, and to not be so completely lost in their content. The beauty of mindfulness is that it does not require a special time, place, or equipment. It can be practiced anywhere, at any time. By bringing this quality of attention to any activity, you can transform the most mundane parts of your day into opportunities for practice. When you brush your teeth, instead of planning your day in your head, bring your full attention to the sensations. The feeling of the bristles on your teeth and gums, the taste of the toothpaste, the sound of the brushing. When you wash the dishes, feel the warmth of the water on your hands, see the soap bubbles, hear the sound of the plates clinking together. When you are walking from your car to your office, feel the sensation of your feet making contact with the ground step by step. Notice the feeling of the air on your skin and the sights and sounds of your environment. Each of these moments is an opportunity to come home to the present, to tame the monkey by giving it the simple job of just being here, now. When we practice mindfulness consistently, something truly remarkable begins to happen. We begin to create a space inside ourselves. For the untrained mind, there is no space between a stimulus and our reaction to it. The stimulus happens, and the habitual reaction fires instantly and automatically. Someone cuts you off in traffic, stimulus, and you are immediately filled with anger, perhaps shouting or honking the horn, reaction. A thought of a past failure arises, stimulus, and you are immediately consumed by feelings of shame and sadness, reaction. We are like puppets, and our ingrained habits are pulling the strings. Mindfulness creates a gap. It inserts a sacred pause between stimulus and response. With practice, the sequence begins to look like this. Someone cuts you off in traffic, stimulus. In that moment, because you have been training your awareness, you are able to notice what is happening internally. You feel the flush of heat in your face, the tightening in your chest, the angry thought forming in your mind. You see it all clearly, not as I am angry, but as, this is the feeling of anger arising. In that moment of seeing, you have created a space, and in that space lies your freedom. Because you are no longer fused with the anger, you are not compelled to act on it. You have a choice. You can still choose to honk the horn, but you can also choose to take a deep breath. You can choose to recognize that the other driver is probably just distracted or having a bad day. You can choose to let it go and preserve your own peace of mind. This freedom to choose your response, rather than being a slave to your automatic reactions, is one of the greatest gifts of the practice. It is the path out of reactive suffering and into a life of wisdom and emotional balance. We have seen that mindfulness is the art of taming the mind, the skill of returning our attention, on purpose and without judgment, to the present moment. We can practice this with any activity, transforming our daily life into a continuous meditation. However, to build the muscle of mindfulness most effectively, it is helpful to have a primary object of attention, a fundamental pole for the monkey to return to. The Buddha taught that the most skillful and accessible of all anchors is one that is with us from the moment of our birth until the moment of our death. It is the constant, rhythmic, life-giving process of our own breath. To deepen our practice, we will now turn our full attention to this anchor in the storm, exploring the profound and ancient practice of mindfulness of breathing. We have now arrived at the very heart of the practice. We understand the restless nature of the monkey mind, and we have been introduced to mindfulness as the gentle art of taming it. We have the parable of the sturdy pole, the anchor to which we can tie the mind to keep it from wandering endlessly through the jungle of distraction. It is time to get intimately acquainted with this pole, to learn its texture, its strength, and how to hold on to it. This anchor, this ultimate tool for cultivating presence and peace, is your own breath. The formal practice of using it is called anapanasati, which simply means mindfulness of in and out breathing. Why the breath? Of all the possible things we could pay attention to, why did the Buddha place such emphasis on this simple, biological process? The reason is its unique and profound genius. First, the breath is always with us. It is utterly portable. You do not need a special cushion, a quiet room, or a sacred text. Wherever you are, in a crowded subway, a stressful meeting, or lying in bed at night, your breath is there, a constant and reliable anchor available in any moment. Second, the breath is always in the present moment. You cannot take a breath that is in the past, nor can you take one that is in the future. To be aware of your breathing is, by definition, to be aware of the here and now. It is a direct doorway out of the imaginary worlds of memory and projection and into the living reality of the present. Most profoundly, the breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. It is the place where the physical and the mental meet and influence one another. Notice what happens to your breath when you are frightened or angry. It becomes short, shallow, and rapid. Now, think of how your breath feels when you are deeply relaxed or have just woken from a restful sleep. It is slow, deep, and gentle. The state of the mind is reflected in the state of the breath, and this connection is a two-way street. Just as the mind can affect the breath can affect the mind. By consciously bringing a calm, gentle awareness to the breath, we can directly send a signal of safety and peace to our own nervous system. It is the most powerful and immediate biofeedback mechanism we possess for regulating our own emotional state. The instructions for beginning this practice are beautifully simple. First, find a posture that embodies a sense of gentle dignity. This can be sitting on a cushion on the floor or sitting upright in a chair with your feet flat on the ground. The key is to keep the spine relatively straight, not in a rigid, military way, but in a way that allows for alertness and the free flow of energy. Your head should be balanced comfortably, your shoulders relaxed, and your hands resting easily in your lap or on your knees. You can close your eyes gently or keep them slightly open with a soft, unfocused gaze toward the floor. The aim is a posture that is a middle way between being tense and being drowsy. Now, bring your awareness to the physical sensations of your breathing. There is no need to change it, control it, or breathe deeply. The task is simply to become a curious scientist of your own experience. Let the body breathe all by itself, as it always does. Your only job is to watch. You might choose to rest your attention at the tip of your nostrils, noticing the subtle sensation of the cool air entering as you breathe in, and the slightly warmer air flowing out as you breathe out. Or, you might prefer to rest your attention on your abdomen, feeling the gentle rise as you inhale and the gentle fall as you exhale. Choose one of these anchor spots and let your awareness rest there, as if it were a butterfly resting softly on a flower. Simply notice the raw sensations of each in-breath and each out-breath. Notice the short pause that sometimes occurs between them. There is nothing else to do. Within a few moments, something predictable will happen. The mind will wander. The monkey will get bored of watching the breath and will leap to another branch. A thought will arise. Am I doing this right? A memory will pop up. You will start planning your grocery list. You will hear a sound outside and begin to create a story about it. This is not a mistake. This is not a sign that you are a bad meditator. This is simply the nature of the untrained mind. It is what minds do. The moment you realize that your mind has wandered, the moment you wake up from the daydream, is a moment of victory. That moment of realizing you have been lost is, in itself, a moment of pure mindfulness. Here lies the most important instruction in the entire practice. When you notice the mind has wandered, you do not scold yourself. You do not get frustrated or sigh with disappointment. Instead, you gently acknowledge where the mind has been, perhaps with a soft mental note like thinking or planning. Then, with the kindness and patience you would show to a small puppy that has wandered off, you gently and lovingly guide your attention back to your chosen anchor spot, back to the physical sensations of the breath. You may have to do this 5 times in a minute. You may have to do this 100 times in a 10-minute session. It does not matter. The practice is not about achieving a state of no thought. The practice is the gentle, repetitive act of returning. Each time you notice the mind has wandered and you bring it back, you are performing one repetition, one bicep curl for the brain. You are weakening the habit of distraction and strengthening the muscle of focused, compassionate attention. A wise teacher once compared this process to taming a wild calf. The mind is the calf, full of restless energy, wanting to run off into the fields to graze on the tasty grasses of thoughts, memories, and worries. The rope is your mindfulness. The stake driven firmly into the ground is the breath. The farmer, who is your wise intention, ties the calf to the stake. The calf pulls and struggles, desperate to get to the grass. But the farmer does not beat the calf. He simply makes sure the knot is secure. Eventually, the calf learns the length of its rope. It realizes it cannot run off into the fields. And in time, it grows calm and lies down peacefully at the foot of the stake. Our mind is that calf. Through gentle, persistent, and non-violent practice, we are training it to find its rest and security in the present moment, anchored by the breath. This simple practice is your first aid kit for the soul. When you feel a wave of panic or anxiety rising, you can immediately turn to your breath. You do not have to stop the feeling. Just bring your full attention to the anchor of the in-breath and the out-breath. This act grounds you in your body, in the physical reality of the present, and disconnects you from the catastrophic stories that the anxious mind is spinning. It breaks the feedback loop where anxious thoughts create anxious feelings, which in turn fuel more anxious thoughts. And for the problem of sleeplessness, this practice is a gentle lullaby. Instead of fighting with your racing thoughts, you simply shift the focus of your attention. You let the thoughts chatter away in the background, and you rest your awareness on the gentle rhythm of your abdomen rising and falling. You are not trying to sleep, an act of striving which only creates more tension. You are simply being with your breath. In this state of non-striving acceptance, you create the perfect conditions for sleep to arise naturally, like a welcome guest who arrives only when you have stopped waiting anxiously for them. The breath is our home base, our refuge. It is the place we can return to again and again to find our center in the midst of life's storms. By practicing with it, we cultivate a stability that allows us to face our experience with greater clarity and less fear. Now that we have this steady anchor, we are better equipped to look at the storms themselves. We are ready to investigate what happens when we are inevitably struck by the painful arrows of life, and to learn how our own reactions can either save us from further harm or inflict upon ourselves a second, far more painful wound. Having established our breath as a reliable anchor, a safe harbor in the storms of life, we can now begin to relate to those storms in a new way. The stability we cultivate through mindfulness is not meant to build a fortress that keeps out all of life's difficulties. Pain, loss, and disappointment are inevitable parts of the human experience. No amount of meditation can make us immune to the unavoidable challenges of existence. The purpose of our practice is not to prevent the rain from falling, but to learn how to not be swept away by the flood. To understand this skill, we must explore one of the Buddha's most practical and powerful teachings, a simple metaphor known as the parable of the second arrow. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and suddenly you are struck in the arm by an arrow. There is an immediate, sharp, and unavoidable physical pain. This is the reality of the situation. It hurts. Now, imagine that in your shock and pain, you do something absurd. You reach into your own quiver, pull out a second arrow, and deliberately stab yourself in the very same spot where the first arrow struck. This second act, this self-inflicted wound, multiplies the pain and turns a difficult situation into a truly agonizing one. The Buddha taught that this is precisely what we do in our own minds, every single day. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. It is the raw, objective event that occurs, independent of our opinion about it. It is the sharp pain of a stubbed toe. It is a critical remark from a colleague. It is the diagnosis of an illness. It is the grief of losing a loved one. It is a financial setback. These events are the givens of life, the friction that comes with being human. They are what we earlier called dukkha, the obvious and painful aspects of existence. This first arrow is what could be called clean pain. It is sharp, it is real, and it hurts. But in its raw form, it is manageable. It is simply the energy of an experience moving through us. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the layer upon layer of mental and emotional proliferation that we add on top of the initial clean pain. The second arrow is entirely optional, entirely self-generated, and it is the source of the vast majority of our suffering. Let us look at how this works. The first arrow is the criticism from your colleague. The pain is the immediate sting of their words. Then we pick up the second arrow. He's right, I'm a failure. Then a third, I'm probably going to get fired now. A fourth, why am I so incompetent? I always mess things up. A fifth, my life is a disaster. This cascade of thoughts, the shame, the fear, the self-recrimination, the catastrophizing, this is the volley of second arrows that turns a moment of pain into an hour, a day, or a week of profound suffering. The first arrow was the event. The subsequent arrows are our story about the event. Consider physical pain. The first arrow is the throbbing sensation in your back. The second arrow is the thought, I can't stand this. The third is, this is never going to get better. The fourth, my life is ruined because of this pain. The fifth, why me? It's so unfair. The initial sensation is the first arrow. The resistance, the fear, the anger, and the self-pity are the second, third, fourth, and fifth arrows that we fire into ourselves, making the experience unbearable. The pain is in the back, the suffering is in the mind. This is where our mindfulness practice becomes our greatest ally. The stability we cultivate by returning to the breath again and again creates that sacred pause between the impact of the first arrow and our habitual tendency to fire the second. When the first arrow of a painful event strikes, our training allows us to notice what is happening inside us. Instead of being immediately swept away by the torrent of reaction, we can witness it. We can feel the heat of anger rising in our chest. We can feel the hollow ache of sadness in our stomach. We can hear the voice of the inner critic beginning its familiar, painful monologue. Because we can see these reactions as they arise as impersonal, conditioned events. Just like the chattering of the monkey mind, we are no longer compelled to identify with them. We don't have to believe the story. We don't have to pick up the arrow. We can create a space around the initial pain and simply be with it, without making it worse. So what do we do in that space? Instead of firing the second arrow, we learn to tend to the wound of the first. This means bringing a gentle, curious, and non-judgmental awareness to the direct experience of the pain itself. If the pain is emotional, like the sting of rejection, we can scan our bodies and ask, where do I feel this? What is the physical sensation? Perhaps it is a tightness in the throat, a heaviness in the heart, or a knot in the stomach. Instead of running away from that feeling or building a story around it, we can simply be with that physical sensation. We can breathe into it, allowing it to be there, holding it in a kind and spacious awareness. We treat it like a crying child that needs to be held, not yelled at. If the pain is physical, we can do the same. We can bring our awareness right to the center of the sensation, not with resistance, but with the curiosity of a scientist. What is its actual quality? Is it hot or cold? Is it sharp or dull? Is it throbbing or constant? By breaking it down into its raw sensory components, we separate the clean pain of the first arrow from the mental resistance and fear of the second. This practice does not magically eliminate all pain, but it radically reduces our suffering. By not adding the fuel of our own mental reactions, the fire of the initial pain often burns out much more quickly and with far less damage. This practice redefines our understanding of strength. In our culture, strength is often seen as the ability to not be hurt, to build thick walls, to pretend the first arrow didn't even land. But this is not strength. It is dissociation. It leads to a brittle and numb existence. True strength, from a spiritual perspective, is the courage to feel the first arrow fully, to be present and vulnerable with the unavoidable pain of life, combined with the wisdom and self-compassion to not pick up the second arrow and make it worse. It is the capacity to keep your heart open even when it hurts. This entire skill, this profound ability to dodge the second arrow, rests upon a single, foundational quality of mind. To be with the first arrow, just as it is, without resisting it or adding a story to it, requires that we accept its presence. It requires that we accept the reality of the present moment, no matter how unpleasant it may be. But what does it truly mean to accept? Is it a form of passive resignation or giving up? Or is it something far more active, courageous, and liberating? To answer that, we must now explore the subtle and powerful art of letting go. We have arrived at a pivotal understanding. To find peace in the midst of life's difficulties, we must learn to feel the sting of the first arrow without firing the second. We have seen that this requires a pause, a moment of mindful awareness that allows us to see our own reactions before they consume us. But this entire practice hinges on a single, crucial capacity: the ability to accept the reality of the first arrow. This word, acceptance, is often deeply misunderstood. It can conjure images of weakness, of passive resignation, of giving up. We think of it as defeat. But in the context of spiritual growth and mental well-being, acceptance is not passive at all. It is a courageous, active, and profoundly liberating art. It is the art of letting go. Let us be very clear about what acceptance is not. It is not approving of a harmful situation. It is not condoning injustice. It is not saying that a painful event is good. If you are in a toxic environment, acceptance does not mean you should simply stay there and suffer. If you are ill, acceptance does not mean you should stop seeking treatment. It is not a synonym for apathy or resignation. Rather, acceptance is the wise and pragmatic act of acknowledging reality as it is, in this very moment, without argument. It is the cessation of our internal war with what has already happened, or what is currently happening. Much of our suffering is not caused by the events in our lives, but by the exhausting battle we wage against them in our minds. Acceptance is the laying down of our weapons in that futile war. Imagine you are caught outside in a sudden downpour. You can stand there, shaking your fist at the sky, shouting, "It shouldn't be raining. This is ruining my day." Does your anger stop the rain? This number. It only ensures that you are both wet and miserable. Acceptance is the simple, clear-eyed recognition. It is raining. This recognition does not mean you like the rain. It simply means you have stopped arguing with an undeniable fact. And only from this point of acceptance can wise action arise. Once you accept that it is raining, you can then choose to open an umbrella, seek shelter, or even find joy in the simple act of walking in the rain. But the argument with reality had to stop first. There is a timeless story that illustrates this principle perfectly. In a forest stood a great and mighty oak tree. It was ancient, its trunk thick and its branches strong. It took immense pride in its own strength, in its ability to stand rigid and unmoving against the elements. Nearby, along the riverbank, grew a slender reed. It was flexible and humble, bowing to even the slightest breeze. One day, a violent storm descended upon the forest. The wind howled with incredible force. The proud oak tree braced itself, using all its might to resist the wind. It held its ground, refusing to yield an inch. The wind roared, and the oak's resistance created an immense strain, until finally, with a deafening crack, its mighty trunk snapped, and the great tree came crashing to the ground. Its very strength had become its downfall. Meanwhile, the humble reed did not fight the wind. As the gale blew, it bent low, yielding to the storm's power, allowing the wind to pass harmlessly over it. When the storm finally passed and the sun emerged, the mighty oak lay shattered and destroyed. The slender reed, however, simply straightened itself up again, unharmed. In life, we often try to be the oak tree. We believe that strength lies in being rigid, in resisting the winds of change and adversity. We cling to our opinions, our plans, and our expectations of how life should be. But life is a storm, change is inevitable, pain is inevitable, and when we meet these forces with rigid resistance, we are far more likely to break. Acceptance is the wisdom of the reed. It is the understanding that true strength lies in flexibility, in the ability to yield to the forces we cannot control. It is a supple, resilient strength that allows us to bend without breaking. This principle is most powerfully applied to our inner world, to our own emotions. Our emotions are like the weather of the mind. There are sunny days of joy, and there are inevitable storms of sadness, anger, and fear. Our habitual strategy is to fight the bad weather. When anxiety arises, we try to push it away. We tell ourselves, "I shouldn't feel this way," and we try to suppress it or distract ourselves from it. This is an act of resistance, an attempt to be the oak tree. And just like the oak, this internal battle only creates more tension and suffering. The practice of acceptance invites us to become the reed. When the storm of anxiety begins to gather, we notice it. We acknowledge it without judgment. This is the feeling of anxiety. We allow it to be there. We do not have to like it. We do not have to approve of it. We simply drop the resistance and give it space to exist. We can do this by turning our attention to the physical sensations of the emotion in the body, just as we did with the first arrow. We feel the tightness in the chest or the knot in the stomach, and we bring a gentle, allowing awareness to it. We breathe with it. We hold it in our awareness as we would hold a frightened bird in our hands gently, without crushing it. Paradoxically, it is this very act of allowing, of ceasing the struggle, that permits the emotion to run its natural course and eventually dissipate. When we stop feeding the storm with our resistance, it loses its power. This art of letting go also extends to the rigid blueprints we hold for our lives. So much of our daily frustration stems from the gap between reality and our fixed ideas of how things should be. My children should be better behaved. My partner should be more considerate. I should be further along in my career. Each of these shoulds is a declaration of war on reality. It is a rigid branch, waiting to be snapped by the winds of what is actually happening. Letting go means gently releasing our white-knuckled grip on these expectations. It does not mean abandoning our values or giving up on our dreams. It means holding them more lightly, with more flexibility. It is the shift from demanding that life conform to our plan, to skillfully and gracefully responding to the life that is actually unfolding before us. Therefore, acceptance is not a passive collapse into defeat. It is the firm, clear, and courageous ground from which all effective action is born. You cannot find your way out of a forest until you first accept that you are lost. You cannot heal from an addiction until you first accept that you have a problem. You cannot mend a broken relationship until you first accept the reality of the hurt that has been caused. In every case, acceptance is the essential, empowering first step. It is the moment we stop wasting our energy on a futile war and begin to marshal our resources for a wise and compassionate response. By learning the art of the reed, we stop breaking ourselves against the storms of life. We free up an immense amount of energy that was once consumed by resistance. The battlefield of the mind becomes a quiet, prepared garden, ready for new and beautiful things to grow. We have made space, and into this space, we can now begin to actively plant the seeds of the qualities we wish to cultivate, starting with the most healing rain of all, the gentle rain of compassion. Having cleared the ground of our mind by learning the art of acceptance, we are no longer at war with reality. We have laid down our arms, and in the quiet space that follows, a new possibility emerges. We have freed up immense energy that was once consumed by resistance, and now we can ask a new question. What shall we plant in this fertile ground? The spiritual path is not merely about ceasing to do harm. It is also about actively cultivating the good. The first and most vital seed we can plant in the garden of the mind, the gentle rain that can heal the wounds of our past struggles, is the quality of karuna, or compassion. In our everyday language, compassion is often seen as a soft, passive feeling, a kind of sympathetic sadness. But in the Buddhist understanding, karuna is far more active and powerful. It is not simply feeling sorry for someone. It is the deep, resonant vibration of the heart in response to suffering, combined with the active aspiration for that suffering to end. It is the heartfelt wish. May you be free from pain. May you be free from your sorrow. It is an engaged, courageous, and tender response to the reality of dukkha in ourselves and in others. It is the ultimate medicine for the ache of existence that we diagnosed at the very beginning of our journey. It is crucial to distinguish true compassion from its near enemy, pity. Pity creates distance. When we feel pity for someone, we are often looking down from a position of imagined superiority. We think, "Oh, you poor thing. I'm so glad I'm not in your situation." Pity reinforces the separation between me, the fortunate one, and you, the unfortunate one. It solidifies the ego. Compassion, on the other hand, destroys distance. It arises from the recognition of our shared humanity. It looks across at another being, not down, and says, "I understand. I also know what it is to suffer. We are in this together." Pity comes from a place of judgment. Compassion comes from a place of connection, born from the wise understanding that all beings, without exception, are subject to the first noble truth of dukkha. Where do we begin this cultivation of a compassionate heart? The Buddha was very clear. We must start with ourselves. Trying to offer compassion to others while treating ourselves with harshness and cruelty is like trying to pour water from an empty cup. It is unsustainable and inauthentic. For so many of us, especially in a culture that prizes perfection and productivity, the most relentless source of second arrows is our own inner critic. It is that familiar voice in our head that judges, belittles, and condemns us for every perceived mistake or failure. "You're not good enough. You failed again. You're so stupid." This internal tyrant is the source of endless, self-inflicted suffering. Self-compassion is the direct antidote. It is the radical act of choosing to treat ourselves with the same kindness, tenderness, and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend who was struggling. The practice of self-compassion can be very tangible. In a moment when you feel you have failed, or when you are experiencing emotional pain, you can pause. You might place a hand gently over your heart, a simple gesture of warmth and care. And you can offer yourself a few phrases of kindness. First, acknowledge the pain with mindfulness. This is a moment of suffering. Second, normalize the experience with wisdom. Suffering is a part of being human. Everyone feels this way sometimes. And third, offer yourself the medicine of compassion. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the care and support that I need. This is not an act of self-pity or making excuses. It is an act of courageously meeting our own pain with a resource of kindness rather than an arsenal of judgment. It is learning to become our own best friend. The power of compassion as an active, boundless force is beautifully illustrated in a story from the Buddha's life. In his community of monks, there was one man who had contracted a dreadful skin disease. His body was covered in oozing sores, and he was so foul-smelling and unpleasant to be around that the other monks, out of disgust and fear, had completely neglected him. He lay alone in his own filth, weak and in despair. The Buddha, hearing of the monk's plight, went to his dwelling. Without a moment's hesitation, the enlightened one began to boil water. He then gently and tenderly began to wash the sick monk's body, cleaning his sores with his own hands. He took the monk's soiled robes, washed them, and laid them out to dry in the sun. The other monks, seeing this, were stunned and ashamed. They approached the Buddha and asked why he, the great teacher, would perform such a lowly and disgusting task. The Buddha looked at them and delivered a timeless teaching. He who tends to the sick, tends to me. He who neglects the sick, neglects me. There is no one in this world more worthy of care than one who is suffering. This story reveals the true nature of karuna. It is not an abstract feeling. It is an action. It does not discriminate. It does not turn away from what is unpleasant. It moves towards suffering with the intention to help. As we cultivate this quality, we can learn to extend it outward in ever-widening circles. We begin with those it is easy to feel compassion for, our family, our friends, our pets. We intentionally bring them to mind and extend the wish. May you be free from your pain. May you be well. Then, we stretch the muscle of the heart. We bring to mind a neutral person, someone we see but don't know well, a cashier at the store, a person we pass on the street. We reflect that this person too has a life filled with challenges, fears, and sorrows, just like us. And we extend the same wish. May you be free from your suffering. The ultimate test and the most liberating practice is to extend compassion to a difficult person, someone who has hurt us or with whom we have conflict. This is not about condoning their harmful actions or forcing a superficial forgiveness. It is a profound shift in perspective. The practice is to look at this person and understand that their harmful actions, their anger, their cruelty, their dishonesty almost certainly arise from their own deep suffering. Their own mind is a chaotic jungle. They are constantly firing second, third, and fourth arrows into themselves, and in their pain, they lash out and cause pain to others. True compassion allows us to see this. We can condemn the action while still holding the person in a compassionate space, wishing for them to be free from the ignorance and pain that causes them to act in such a way. This practice does not necessarily change them, but it frees us from the prison of our own hatred and resentment. Compassion is the heart's tender response to the reality of pain. It is the medicine that soothes the sting of the first arrow and prevents us from firing the second. It is the gentle rain that allows the hard, cracked earth of our hearts to become soft and receptive again. It is a profound wish for all beings, including ourselves, to be free from sorrow. But this is only one half of a truly balanced and radiant heart. If compassion is our response to suffering, what is our response to happiness and well-being? If karuna is the wish for beings to be free from pain, what is the corresponding wish for them to find joy, peace, and true happiness? To answer this, we must now explore compassion's luminous twin, the practice of metta, or loving kindness. Having planted the seed of compassion, or karuna, in the garden of the mind, we have learned to meet suffering with a tender heart. We have developed the wish for ourselves and all others to be free from pain. This practice softens the world, healing the wounds of judgment and isolation. But a garden with only one type of flower is incomplete. A heart that only responds to suffering is only half alive. To bring our hearts into full and radiant balance, we must now cultivate compassion's luminous twin. If karuna is the heart's response to sorrow, we must now learn the heart's response to joy and its profound capacity for benevolent well-wishing. We must learn to practice metta, or loving kindness. Metta is the wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and well. It is an unconditional, boundless, and benevolent goodwill. It is crucial to understand that this is not the conditional, romantic, or sentimental love that we so often think of. That kind of love is transactional. It is given because we get something in return: pleasure, security, validation. Metta is different. It is like the sun. The sun shines its warmth and light on everything in its path without discrimination. It shines on the beautiful rose garden, on the jagged rock, on the muddy puddle, and on the forgotten weed. It does not ask whether an object is worthy of its warmth. It simply gives it freely. Metta is the practice of cultivating a heart that radiates this same unconditional warmth and friendliness to all. Just as compassion is the direct antidote to cruelty, metta is the direct antidote to a host of toxic mental states. It is the medicine for anger, ill will, jealousy, and fear. It is impossible to feel genuine, heartfelt, loving kindness towards someone and, in the very same moment, feel anger or hatred. The warmth of metta melts the ice of resentment. It is also the antidote to jealousy. Jealousy is the pain we feel at the happiness of others. Metta is the joy we feel at the happiness of others. It is a genuine celebration of their success and well-being. Furthermore, metta is a powerful antidote to fear. Fear and anxiety cause the heart to contract, to create a protective barrier between me and a perceived hostile world. Metta does the opposite. It expands the heart, dissolving the boundaries of self and other, fostering a deep sense of connection and safety. To practice metta is to fundamentally change the emotional climate of your mind from one of a cold, defensive winter to a warm, open, and welcoming spring. Like compassion, loving kindness is a quality that can be intentionally cultivated through a formal meditation practice. The method is simple, beautiful, and profound. We begin, as always, by finding a comfortable and dignified posture, allowing the body to be at ease. And we begin, as always, with ourselves. It is the foundation of the practice. We cannot radiate the sunshine of metta to others if our own inner landscape is cold and dark. We bring a sense of gentle friendliness to our own being. You can again place a hand on your heart to foster this feeling of warmth. Then, you silently repeat a few phrases, letting the feeling behind the words permeate your being. The traditional phrases are, "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," "May I be safe," "May I live with ease." We are not demanding these things, but gently offering them to ourselves, as a loving parent would to a child. Once a measure of warmth has been generated for ourselves, we expand the circle. We bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom we feel natural and uncomplicated affection. We visualize this person clearly in our mind's eye, perhaps imagining them smiling and happy. Then, we direct the warmth of our heart toward them, repeating the same phrases: "May you be happy," "May you be healthy," "May you be safe," "May you live with ease." We feel the metta flowing from us to them. After some time, we stretch the heart further by bringing to mind a neutral person, someone we neither like nor dislike, such as a person who serves us coffee or delivers our mail. We recognize that this person, just like us, also wishes to be happy and to avoid suffering. And so, we extend the same heartfelt wishes to them. The next stage is the most transformative. We bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict or for whom we feel resentment. This is challenging. The practice here is not to force a feeling that isn't there or to condone their harmful behavior. It is an act of profound wisdom. We recognize that their actions are driven by their own inner turmoil and unhappiness. A truly happy and peaceful person does not cause harm to others. From this understanding, we try, as best we can, to extend the wish for them to be happy. For in finding true happiness, they would cease to be a source of suffering for themselves and for others. Finally, we let the circle become boundless. We radiate the feeling of metta in all directions: front, back, left, right, up, and down. We extend it to all beings everywhere, seen and unseen, near and far, human and animal. without any exception. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be safe. May all beings live with ease. This practice trains the heart in the beautiful habit of boundless benevolence. The power of metta is not merely a pleasant feeling, it is a transformative force. There is a dramatic story that illustrates its power to tame even the most violent rage. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, conspired to assassinate him. He arranged for a notoriously savage elephant named Nalagiri to be intoxicated with alcohol and then unleashed upon the Buddha as he walked through a narrow street. When the people saw the enraged elephant charging, screaming, and destroying everything in its path, they fled in terror. The Buddha's loyal attendant, Ananda, tried to stand in front of him to act as a human shield, but the Buddha gently moved him aside. He stood perfectly still, calm and unafraid, and did something extraordinary. He did not use a weapon or a magical power. He simply opened his heart and radiated a powerful, unwavering field of pure metta directly at the charging animal. As the furious elephant entered this invisible field of loving kindness, a miracle occurred. Its rage dissolved. Its frantic charge slowed to a walk. Its ears, once flared in aggression, drooped softly. It approached the Buddha, knelt down, and allowed the Buddha to gently stroke its forehead. The ferocious beast had been completely tamed, not by force, but by the overwhelming power of unconditional love. This story teaches us that metta is not a weak or sentimental emotion. It is a profound strength, a force that can pacify the raging elephants of hatred, anger, and fear within our own minds and in the world around us. By practicing metta, we are actively rewiring our brains for connection and positivity. Our default response to meeting a stranger begins to shift from suspicion to friendliness. Our capacity for joy increases as we learn to celebrate the happiness of others. This practice directly fosters the resilient optimism that is a core theme of our journey. A truly optimistic person is not one who is blind to problems, but one who maintains a fundamental faith in the potential for goodness and connection in themselves and in others. Metta is the training that builds this faith. We now have the two wings of a balanced and compassionate heart. Karuna, the wish for all beings to be free from suffering, and metta, the wish for all beings to find happiness. These practices fundamentally change our inner world, which in turn changes how we perceive and relate to the outer world. When our heart is guided by these benevolent intentions, it naturally begins to influence what we do, what we say, and even what we think. This leads us to a deeper consideration of our actions themselves. What are the consequences of an action born from loving kindness versus one born from anger or greed? To understand this intricate web of cause and effect, we must now turn our attention to the universal law of karma. Having cultivated the twin qualities of a wise heart, compassion, the wish to alleviate suffering, and loving kindness, the wish to promote happiness, we find our intentions naturally shifting. The inner climate of our mind has changed from one of defensive contraction to one of open benevolence. This inner shift inevitably begins to influence our outer world because our intentions are the seeds of our actions. This leads us directly to one of the most famous, yet profoundly misunderstood principles of Eastern philosophy, the universal law of karma. In the West, the word karma is often thrown around casually, equated with concepts like fate, destiny, or a kind of cosmic justice system. We imagine some celestial accountant keeping a tally of our good and bad deeds, dispensing rewards and punishments accordingly. A common phrase is karma's a bitch, implying a vengeful force that punishes wrongdoers. These popular notions, however, are a deep misreading of the original teaching. The Buddhist understanding of karma is not about fate, destiny, or divine retribution. It is a far more subtle, psychological, and empowering natural law. It is the law of cause and effect as it applies to intentional action. The word karma itself, in the ancient Pali language, simply means action or deed. The Buddha's revolutionary insight was to pinpoint the single most important ingredient in any action, the intention behind it. He famously stated, "It is intention, O monks, that I call karma. Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind. The physical action itself is secondary to the quality of the volition that drives it. Consider this. A skilled surgeon takes a scalpel and cuts into a person's body. In another part of the city, a mugger takes a knife and cuts into another person's body. The physical act cutting human flesh with a sharp blade is superficially similar, but the intentions are polar opposites. The surgeon's intention is to heal, an act born of compassion and skill. The mugger's intention is to harm and to take, an act born of greed and cruelty. According to the law of karma, these two acts, though physically similar, will produce vastly different results, both in the world and, most importantly, in the mind of the person acting. Karma is best understood not as a system of cosmic justice, but as a law of nature, as impersonal and reliable as the law of gravity. If you hold a stone in your hand and let it go, it will fall. There is no judge deciding the stone should fall. It falls because of the natural law of gravity. Similarly, if you act with a cruel intention, that action will create a certain result, a certain residue in your own mind and in the world. If you act with a kind intention, it too will produce its corresponding effect. It is a simple, observable law of moral and psychological physics. A helpful way to understand this is through the parable of the farmer. A farmer wishes to have a harvest of sweet, nourishing corn. The farmer understands the laws of agriculture. He knows that he cannot plant stones and expect to harvest bread. He knows he cannot sow the seeds of poisonous weeds and hope to reap a crop of delicious fruit. This is not a punishment or a reward. It is simply the way nature works. You reap what you sow. If the farmer wants corn, he must first consciously choose and plant corn seeds. These seeds are his intentional actions. Then, he must tend to the field. He must water the seeds, ensure they get sunlight, and pull out the weeds that would choke them. This tending of the field is the practice of cultivating mindfulness and a wholesome state of mind. The eventual harvest, the sweet corn, is the result, or vipaka, of his previous actions. It is the natural fruition of the seeds he has planted and tended. Our mind is the field. Our intentions are the seeds. The actions of our body, speech, and mind are the planting of those seeds. And the quality of our life, our general tendency toward happiness or suffering, is the harvest. Every time we choose the thought of anger over one of forgiveness, we plant a seed of anger. Every time we choose to speak a harsh word instead of a kind one, we plant a seed of harshness. Every time we choose an act of generosity over one of selfishness, we plant a seed of generosity. These seeds do not necessarily sprout immediately. Some seeds lie dormant for a long time. This explains the complexity of life. Our present moment is a mixture of two things. We are harvesting the fruits of seeds planted long ago, while at the same time, we are planting new seeds that will ripen in the future. This is why we sometimes see people who are currently acting with kindness still facing immense hardship. They may be experiencing the ripening of old, unwholesome karma. Seen in this light, the law of karma is not a fatalistic doctrine that leaves us as helpless victims of our past. On the contrary, it is the ultimate teaching of empowerment. It means that you are the architect of your own life. You are the farmer. The power to change your future lies not in some distant past or in the hands of some external being, but in the quality of your intention in this very moment. The past is gone, but right now you have the power to choose. You can choose to plant a seed of patience. You can choose to plant a seed of understanding. You can choose to plant a seed of loving kindness. Each of these skillful choices, however small, is a powerful cause that will contribute to a future of greater peace and well-being. This understanding places the full responsibility for our happiness right where it belongs, in our own hands. It frees us from the childish belief that someone else is responsible for our suffering and empowers us to become the conscious creators of our own experience. Our actions, the seeds of karma, are planted through three doors: the body, speech, and mind. The actions of the body are the most obvious, giving a gift, striking a blow. The actions of the mind are thoughts, our intentions, our silent wishes are the most fundamental, for they are the root of all other actions. But the door through which we interact most frequently, the door through which we create the most harmony and discord, connection and alienation in our daily lives, is the door of speech. Our words have the power to build up or to tear down, to heal or to wound. Given that our words are such a potent source of karma, creating ripples that affect both ourselves and others in profound ways, it becomes essential to cultivate skillfulness in how we speak. We must learn to use this powerful tool with the precision of a surgeon, rather than the carelessness of a brute. To do this, we must now turn our attention to the specific and practical guidance offered in the art of right speech. Having embraced the empowering law of karma, we understand that our actions of body, speech, and mind are the very seeds that create the landscape of our lives. We are the farmers of our own reality. This realization brings with it a profound sense of responsibility and a desire to act with greater skill and wisdom. Of the three doors through which we plant these seeds, the door of speech is perhaps the most active, the most complex, and the one with the most immediate power to create either harmony or discord. A single word can start a war or seal a peace. It can shatter a heart or heal a lifetime of wounds. Recognizing this immense power, the Buddha included a specific and practical training in his path to liberation, the practice of samavaka, or right speech. Right speech is not about censorship or suppressing our self-expression. It is the art of transforming our communication from a reactive, unconscious habit into a mindful, compassionate, and beneficial skill. It is about learning to use our words as instruments of truth, kindness, and healing, rather than as weapons of harm. The traditional framework for this practice is beautifully simple, beginning with 4 guidelines on what to abstain from. The first guideline is to abstain from false speech. At its most basic level, this means not telling deliberate lies. When we lie, we create a false reality that we must then struggle to maintain. This creates immense inner tension and complication, and it fundamentally severs the bond of trust between ourselves and others. Truthfulness simplifies our lives and grounds us in reality. But this guideline goes deeper than just avoiding outright lies. It includes abstaining from exaggeration for self-aggrandizement, from making promises we have no intention of keeping, and from the subtle deceptions we use to manipulate situations to our advantage. It is a commitment to being a person whose words can be trusted, a person who honors reality. The second guideline is to abstain from slanderous or divisive speech. This is speech that is intended to set one person against another. It is the poison of gossip that maliciously harms someone's reputation behind their back. It is the act of carrying tales, telling one person the negative things another has said about them, purely to stir up conflict. This kind of speech creates a world of suspicion, discord, and broken relationships. It stems from a mind that finds a perverse pleasure in the disharmony of others. Right speech calls on us to become a force for unity, not division. The third guideline is to abstain from harsh or abusive speech. These are words used as weapons. This includes obvious forms like shouting, insulting, cursing, and name-calling. But it also includes the more subtle forms of verbal aggression, biting sarcasm that belittles, condescending tones that patronize, and cold, cruel words intended to inflict emotional pain. Harsh speech is a direct expression of a mind caught in anger and ill will. It may provide a momentary, fiery release for the speaker, but it always wounds the listener and plants unwholesome karmic seeds of anger and resentment in both hearts. The fourth guideline is to abstain from idle chatter. This may seem the most harmless of the 4, but it is deeply significant. Idle chatter is pointless, frivolous talk, gossip that isn't necessarily malicious but is simply empty. It is speaking for the sake of filling silence, talking about the trivial affairs of others, engaging in endless speculation, and opinionating. While it may not actively harm, it dissipates our precious mental energy. It keeps the mind in a state of superficial agitation, like a shallow pond constantly rippled by the wind. This prevents the mind from ever becoming calm and clear enough for deep contemplation and insight. It is a distraction that keeps us from attending to what is truly important. While this framework of what to avoid is helpful, the practice of right speech is not just about refraining from the negative. It is also about actively cultivating the positive. We can reframe these 4 guidelines into a proactive practice of skillful communication. Instead of just not lying, we commit to speaking what is true and useful. Instead of just not slandering, we actively speak words that build community and promote harmony, praising the good qualities of others and encouraging reconciliation. Instead of just not being harsh, we consciously cultivate a gentle and kind way of speaking, using words that are soothing, courteous, and pleasant to the ear. And instead of just not engaging in idle chatter, we learn to value silence, speaking only when our words have meaning and purpose. The Buddha offered a beautiful and practical filter that we can use before we speak, a series of gates that our words must pass through. Before speaking, we can ask ourselves these questions. First, is it true? If it is not true, we should not say it. If it is true, we proceed to the second gate. Is it beneficial? Will speaking these words lead to a good and helpful outcome for myself and for others? If not, we should refrain from speaking, even if the words are true. If it is both true and beneficial, we proceed to the third gate. Is it kind? Are these words welcome? Will they be pleasant for the other person to hear? Or are they harsh and abrasive? If they are unkind, we should reconsider. And finally, we ask, is this the right time to speak? A piece of advice, even if true, beneficial, and kind, can be unhelpful if the other person is not ready or willing to hear it. Only when a statement has passed through all these gates, when it is true, beneficial, kind, and timely, can we be confident that it is an expression of right speech. This checklist transforms speech from a reactive habit into a deeply mindful and compassionate act. There is one final, crucial component to right speech, and it involves not speaking at all. It is the practice of deep listening. Often, when we listen to others, we are not truly listening. We are busy formulating our own reply, waiting for our turn to speak, judging what they are saying, or filtering their words through our own needs and opinions. This is not communication. It is a series of competing monologues. Deep listening, or compassionate listening, is a practice born from the intention to help the other person suffer less. It is the art of offering our full, undivided, and non-judgmental presence. We listen not to fix, advise, or correct, but simply to understand. We listen for the feelings and the needs that are hidden behind the words. To be truly heard, to have one's pain and joy received in a space of silent, loving awareness, is one of the most profound gifts one human being can offer another. It is a practice of pure generosity and is the other, silent half of right speech. By practicing right speech, we begin to clean up our karmic footprint. Our relationships become more harmonious. Our minds become less agitated and more peaceful. We use our words to bring light into the world, not more darkness. This commitment to ethical conduct, to acting in ways that do not cause harm, is a cornerstone of the spiritual path. It does not, however, end with our personal interactions. It extends into every area of our lives, including the many hours we spend at work. How can we ensure that the way we earn our living is also aligned with these principles of non-harming and compassionate action? This vital question brings us to the next step on our journey, the exploration of right livelihood. Having explored the ethical frameworks of right speech, we have learned to make our words a source of healing and harmony. Now, we extend this principle of mindful, ethical conduct into the vast and consuming area of our lives where we spend the majority of our waking hours. Our work, how we earn a living, how we contribute our energy to the world, is not separate from our spiritual path. It is a central expression of it. This is the practice of sama ajiva, or right livelihood. It is the art of integrating our deepest values into our professional life, ensuring that our work becomes a source of purpose rather than a source of conflict and harm. The foundation of right livelihood is the principle of non-harming. At its most basic level, it means choosing a profession that does not, either directly or indirectly, cause harm to ourselves or to other living beings. The Buddha, in his time, laid out 5 specific types of business that a dedicated practitioner should avoid because they are fundamentally based on causing harm. These were business in weapons, which directly facilitates violence and death; business in human beings, which includes slavery and prostitution, treating people as commodities; business in meat, specifically the raising and slaughtering of animals for profit; business in intoxicants, such as alcohol, which cloud the mind and lead to heedlessness; and business in poisons, substances intended to kill. While these categories may seem ancient, their underlying principle is timeless and profoundly relevant today. In our complex global economy, these 5 categories can be seen as pointing toward broader ethical questions we must ask ourselves about our work. Business and weapons can extend to any industry that profits from conflict and violence. Business and human beings can be seen in industries that rely on exploitative labor practices. Business and intoxicants can be expanded to include any product, service, or technology that is intentionally designed to create addiction and degrade human attention for profit. Business and poisons can be seen in industries that knowingly pollute our shared environment, harming ecosystems and future generations. Right livelihood invites us to look with honesty and courage at the consequences of our work, asking a simple question: does my work contribute to the well-being and happiness of the world, or does it contribute to its suffering? This can be a confronting question. For most of us, our choice of work is dictated by economic necessity, education, and circumstance. This teaching is not meant to be a rigid commandment that fills us with guilt or demands that we immediately quit our jobs. Rather, it is intended as a guiding star, a direction to orient ourselves toward. It is a call to bring mindfulness and ethical reflection into our work, right here and now. The practice begins not by changing our job, but by changing our attitude and intention within the job we have. To illustrate this, consider the story of two carpenters, both tasked with making chairs. The first carpenter sees his work as nothing more than a tedious means to a paycheck. He resents his job, his boss, and his customers. He works mindlessly, cutting corners where he can, using the cheapest materials, and doing just enough to not get fired. His mind is filled with thoughts of wanting to be somewhere else. For him, work is a source of alienation, stress, and unwholesome karma. He is not practicing right livelihood, even though making chairs is an honest trade. The second carpenter approaches her work as a practice. She sees her craft as an opportunity for service and mindfulness. She selects the wood with care. She measures each cut with precision. As she works, her mind is not lost in resentment or fantasy. It is present with the task at hand. She feels the texture of the wood. She hears the sound of the saw. She watches the form of the chair emerge under her skillful hands. Her intention is to create something strong, beautiful, and useful, a chair that will provide rest and comfort to whoever uses it. She is not just making a chair. She is expressing her integrity, her care, and her mindfulness through her work. This second carpenter is practicing right livelihood. Her work becomes a form of meditation, a source of quiet satisfaction and wholesome karma. This parable teaches us that how we work is as important as what we do. Whatever our job may be, we can begin to practice right livelihood today by bringing a new quality of attention and intention to it. We can strive to be more helpful and kind to our colleagues. We can perform our duties with greater integrity and thoroughness. We can look for ways to minimize waste and reduce harm within our sphere of influence. We can choose to see our work not merely as a way to get money, but as a way to contribute our unique skills to the intricate web of society. By bringing this mindful and compassionate attitude to our work, we transform it. A job that once felt meaningless and draining can become a source of purpose and quiet dignity. Over time, this practice of inner reflection may indeed guide our external choices. As we become more attuned to our values, we may find ourselves naturally gravitating towards work that is more aligned with them. We might choose to leave a job that feels ethically compromised for one that offers a greater sense of contribution. Right livelihood is a gradual path of bringing our outer life into greater harmony with our inner aspirations. It is about using our precious time and energy in a way that we can feel good about, a way that leaves the world and our own hearts a little better off. It is a commitment to ensuring that our entire life, not just the time we spend in meditation, becomes an expression of our journey towards peace and wisdom. The practices of right speech and right livelihood are about our skillful engagement with the external world. They are about how we navigate our relationships, our communities, and our responsibilities. But to walk this path effectively, to make these wise choices day after day, requires a deep inner balance. How do we engage with the world's challenges without becoming overwhelmed? How do we hold to our principles without becoming rigid or self-righteous? How do we avoid the trap of becoming so worldly that we lose our inner peace, or so withdrawn that we cannot be of service? To navigate these questions, we must understand the Buddha's great guiding principle for the entire spiritual path: a principle of profound balance known as the middle way. Having established the ethical frameworks for our speech and our work, we have brought our spiritual practice from the meditation cushion out into the world. We are learning to navigate our relationships and responsibilities with greater mindfulness and integrity. But as we engage with the complexities of life, we face a constant challenge. How do we maintain our balance? How do we pursue our goals without becoming consumed by greed? How do we practice discipline without becoming harsh and rigid? How do we avoid falling into the trap of worldly indulgence on one hand, or bitter, withdrawn asceticism on the other? To navigate this razor's edge, the Buddha offered a master principle, a core strategy for the entire spiritual journey. It is the wisdom of balance, the art of walking the middle way. The origin of this profound teaching lies in the Buddha's own life story. Before his enlightenment, as Prince Siddhartha, he lived in the extreme of sensual indulgence. He was raised in a palace, intentionally shielded from all signs of suffering. He was surrounded by every imaginable luxury, the finest foods, the most beautiful music, silks, perfumes, and constant entertainment. He had everything that the world considers a source of happiness. Yet, in the midst of this endless pleasure, he felt a deep and gnawing sense of emptiness. He saw that pleasure was fleeting, that happiness dependent on external conditions was unstable, and that a life dedicated to chasing sensory highs was ultimately hollow and unsatisfying. This extreme had failed to provide a lasting answer to the problem of human suffering. So, he renounced his palace and embarked on a journey to the other extreme, the path of severe self-mortification. For 6 years, he lived as an ascetic, subjecting his body to the most grueling hardships imaginable. He practiced holding his breath until he would pass out from the pain in his head. He ate so little that his stomach touched his backbone, and his ribs stuck out like the rafters of a dilapidated barn. He slept on beds of thorns and exposed his body to the searing heat of the day and the freezing cold of the night. He believed that by torturing the body, by completely denying its needs, he could conquer it and liberate his spirit. But this extreme also failed. He found that by weakening his body, he had also weakened and clouded his mind. He was no closer to the truth, only closer to death. One day, emaciated and near collapse, he accepted a simple bowl of milk rice from a young village girl named Sujata. As the nourishment spread through his body, his strength returned, and with it, a profound insight dawned. He had tried the path of indulgence and found it wanting. He had tried the path of self-torture and found it fruitless. The true path, he realized, must lie somewhere in between these two dead ends. At that moment, he remembered an experience from his youth, sitting peacefully under a rose apple tree. It was a state of natural, simple well-being, free from both craving and aversion. He realized the way forward was not to punish the body, but to care for it as an instrument for awakening, not to indulge the mind, but to train it. This realization is the heart of the middle way. It is crucial to understand that this is not a weak compromise or a call to mediocrity. It is not about being lukewarm. The middle way is a noble, transcendent path that rises above the two extremes, avoiding their inherent flaws. The Buddha later used a beautiful analogy to explain this. He compared the practice to tuning a lute. If the string is wound too tightly, it will be shrill and will easily snap. If the string is too loose, it will be dull and make no sound at all. To produce beautiful music, the string must be tuned just right, not too tight, not too loose. Our spiritual practice is the same. We must tune the string of our effort to this perfect, balanced pitch. This ancient wisdom is a powerful guide for navigating the challenges of our modern lives. Consider the balance between work and rest. One extreme is the workaholic, constantly striving, pushing, and sacrificing their health and relationships for success. Living with a string that is far too tight, perpetually on the verge of snapping from burnout. The other extreme is the idler, avoiding all effort and responsibility, living a life of laxity and meaninglessness. With a string so loose, it produces no music. The middle way is finding a sustainable rhythm, engaging in meaningful work with diligence, while also honoring the body's need for rest and the mind's need for peace. We see this principle in our spiritual practice itself. One can become a spiritual ascetic, treating meditation as a harsh discipline, berating oneself for every stray thought, creating a tense and joyless practice. This is the tight string. Conversely, one can become lazy, making excuses, and lacking any real commitment to the practice. This is the loose string. The middle way combines gentle, consistent effort with a deep sense of self-compassion. We commit to the practice, but we hold it lightly, with the kindness that understands that the mind will wander, and that is okay. We can apply this to our ambitions and desires. The extreme of indulgence is a life of relentless, grasping ambition, always chasing the next goal, the next promotion, the next possession, never finding contentment. The extreme of denial is a cynical apathy, a belief that it is better not to want anything at all, which leads to a life devoid of passion and growth. The middle way is to have wholesome aspirations, to strive to be a better person, and to contribute to the world, while simultaneously cultivating a deep sense of contentment and gratitude for the present moment, independent of our achievements. This wisdom of balance is the very foundation of a realistic and resilient optimism. A naive, toxic positivity that refuses to look at suffering is an extreme of indulgence. It is a fragile optimism, easily shattered by the first arrow of life. On the other side, a bleak, cynical pessimism that refuses to see the possibility of joy, connection, and goodness is an extreme of self-denial. It is a worldview that offers no hope and no energy for positive change. The middle way fosters a clear-eyed optimism. It is the capacity to see reality clearly, in its totality to acknowledge the dukkha, the pain, and the injustice, while also recognizing the beauty, the love, and the immense potential for goodness in ourselves and others. This balanced view, free from both naive fantasy and cynical despair, is what allows for wise, compassionate, and sustainable action in the world. By walking this middle way, we learn to navigate the full spectrum of life with greater grace and wisdom. We are no longer violently thrown about by our successes or our failures. We can experience pleasure without clinging to it, and we can experience pain without being destroyed by it. This stable, balanced mind becomes the perfect vessel for cultivating the highest states of heart and mind. It is a mind that is ready to experience the most sublime and liberating emotions. How does such a mind learn to rejoice in the good fortune of others? And how does it maintain its unshakable peace in the face of life's 10,000 joys and sorrows? To answer this, we must now explore the final two of the four great immeasurable states: sympathetic joy and equanimity. Walking the middle way provides us with the essential balance needed to navigate our lives with wisdom and grace. It prevents us from being thrown off course by the extremes of indulgence and denial. With this newfound stability, we are now ready to cultivate the most refined and sublime states of the heart, the final two of the four divine abodes, or Brahma Viharas. We have already explored loving kindness, the wish for all to be happy, and compassion, the wish for all to be free from suffering. We now turn to their radiant companions, sympathetic joy, or mudita, and the profound peak of emotional balance, equanimity, or upekkha. Mudita is the practice of sympathetic, or appreciative joy. It is the ability to feel genuine, wholehearted happiness at the good fortune, success, and happiness of others. In many ways, this is one of the most challenging and countercultural of the heart practices. Our society is deeply conditioned by a sense of competition and scarcity. We are often taught, consciously or unconsciously, that someone else's success somehow diminishes our own. This gives rise to the painful mental states of envy and jealousy. Envy is the poison we drink, hoping the other person will suffer. It is a state of inner poverty that believes happiness is a zero-sum game. Mudita is the direct and powerful antidote to this poison. It comes from a place of abundance, from the understanding that joy is not a limited resource. The practice of mudita involves actively looking for the happiness and success of others and training our hearts to celebrate it. When you hear that a colleague has received a promotion, the habitual mind might react with a pang of envy. The mind trained in mudita learns to pause and instead to consciously generate a feeling of joy for that person's accomplishment. How wonderful for them. May their success bring them great happiness. When you see a happy couple walking hand in hand, instead of feeling loneliness, you can feel a genuine sense of joy for the love they share. This practice systematically dismantles the ego's competitive instinct and replaces it with a sense of joyful connection. It is a profound source of optimism, as it allows us to find happiness not only in our own good fortune, but in the good fortune of everyone we meet, multiplying our opportunities for joy a millionfold. The fourth and culminating divine abode is upekkha, or equanimity. If loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy are the radiant expressions of the heart, equanimity is the deep, unshakable foundation upon which they stand. Equanimity is a state of profound mental balance, of even-mindedness, of unshakable peace in the face of the changing fortunes of life. The Buddha taught that all of us are constantly being blown about by 8 worldly winds: pleasure and its opposite, pain, gain and its opposite, loss, praise and its opposite, blame, and fame and its opposite, disrepute. An untrained mind is like a leaf in the wind, elated when things go well, and devastated when they go poorly. We are lifted up by praise and crushed by criticism. We cling desperately to gain and pleasure, and we recoil in fear from loss and pain. Equanimity is the practice of developing a mind that is like a great, solid mountain. The winds of life may howl, the rains may beat down, and the sun may blaze, but the mountain remains stable, centered, and unmoved. It is absolutely crucial to understand that equanimity is not indifference or apathy. Indifference is a state of emotional shutdown, a form of aversion. It says, "I don't care. It has nothing to do with me." It is a contraction of the heart. Equanimity is the opposite. It is a state of immense expansion. It is a heart so open, so caring, and so connected to all of life that its peace does not depend on any particular outcome. It is a radical, unconditional acceptance of reality, born not of coldness, but of profound wisdom. It is the wisdom that understands anicca, impermanence, and so it does not cling to pleasure or praise, knowing they will pass. It is the wisdom that understands anatta, no self, and so it does not take blame or criticism so personally. It is the wisdom that understands karma, and so it finds its security in its own wholesome actions, rather than in the fleeting opinions of others. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates the wisdom of equanimity. An old farmer lived in a village with his son. He had only one horse to help him work his fields. One day, the horse ran away. The farmer's neighbors came to console him. "Oh, what terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A week later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a herd of 10 wild horses. The neighbors gathered again, this time to congratulate him. "What incredible good luck," they exclaimed. The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off, and his leg was badly broken. The neighbors came again, shaking their heads. "How awful. This is truly bad luck." The farmer again replied, "Maybe." A few weeks later, the emperor's army came to the village, forcibly conscripting all the able-bodied young men to fight in a bloody and hopeless war. The farmer's son, with his broken leg, was the only young man in the village to be spared. The farmer in this story embodies upekkha. He possesses a wisdom that sees beyond the immediate, superficial labels of good and bad. He understands that the web of cause and effect is vast and complex, and that we cannot possibly know the full implications of any single event. He maintains his inner peace by not getting attached to either good fortune or misfortune, but by meeting all of life's unpredictable turns with a calm, steady, and open mind. These 4 states, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, are the hallmarks of a liberated heart. They work together in perfect harmony. Loving kindness and compassion are the warm, engaged outreach of the heart. Equanimity is the cool, spacious wisdom that keeps them balanced, ensuring that our compassion does not turn into burnout or grief, and that our loving kindness does not become clinging or attachment. These qualities are not just beautiful philosophical ideals. They are psychological skills that can be intentionally developed. They are the beautiful blossoms that can be grown in the garden of any human mind. But like any garden, it requires consistent, dedicated cultivation. It requires a formal practice that can water these seeds and give them the light they need to grow. To understand how to do this systematic cultivation, we must now turn our attention to the engine room of the path, the dedicated and transformative practice of meditation. or bhavana, we have journeyed through the sublime landscapes of the heart, exploring the boundless states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These qualities represent the pinnacle of a healthy, balanced, and liberated mind, but they do not arise by accident. They are not simply moods that we hope to stumble upon. They are skills, the beautiful flowers that grow in the garden of the mind, and like any garden, they require dedicated, systematic cultivation. This is where we turn to the engine room of the entire spiritual path, the formal practice of bhavana, which we know in the West as meditation. The word bhavana literally means mental cultivation or development. This is a beautiful and accurate description. It frames meditation not as a passive act of zoning out, but as an active process of nurturing wholesome qualities and gently weeding out unwholesome ones. If our mind is a garden, then meditation is the time we set aside each day to tend to it. It is our laboratory for self-discovery and our gymnasium for mental and emotional training. Just as we go to a physical gym to strengthen our muscles, we come to the meditation cushion to strengthen the faculties of our hearts and minds. In the Buddhist tradition, this mental cultivation generally follows two main pathways, like two wings of a great bird that work together to create flight. These are the practices of samatha and vipassana. Samatha, which translates as tranquility or concentration, is the practice of calming the mind. Its goal is to tame the wild energy of the monkey mind, to gather the scattered fragments of our attention, and to bring the mind to a state of stillness, stability, and unity. It is the direct antidote to distraction, agitation, and mental restlessness. The primary tool we use for developing samatha is anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing practice we have already explored. By continually returning our focus to the single, steady anchor of the breath, we are training the mind to settle down. A powerful analogy for samatha is that of a glass of muddy water. If you want the water to become clear, you don't need to stir it or try to filter out the mud. You simply need to set the jar down and let it be still. Over time, the mud, representing our mental agitations and defilements, will naturally settle to the bottom, and the water will become clear and lucid. Samatha meditation is the act of letting the jar of our mind sit still. Once the water is clear, however, we can do something new. We can see through it. This is where the second wing of the practice, vipassana, comes in. Vipassana means insight, or to see clearly. It is the practice of using the calm, concentrated mind developed through samatha as a powerful microscope to investigate the true nature of reality. It is not enough to simply have a calm mind. The goal is liberation, which requires wisdom. Vipassana is the cultivation of that wisdom. It involves turning the sharp, steady beam of our attention onto our own experience and seeing for ourselves the universal truths the Buddha pointed to. We observe our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations from moment to moment, and we directly perceive their characteristics. We see, not as an intellectual idea but as a direct experience, that all things are marked by anicca, impermanence. We see that every thought, every feeling, every sensation arises, lingers for a moment, and passes away. We see the subtle unsatisfactoriness, the dukkha, that comes from trying to cling to these fleeting phenomena. And we see the truth of anatta, no self, recognizing that there is no solid, permanent I behind the experience, but only these impersonal, unfolding processes. Samatha and vipassana are not separate, competing systems. They are intimately interwoven and mutually supportive. Samatha provides the stability and clarity needed for insight to arise. A shaky microscope is useless for fine investigation. Vipassana provides the purpose for that stability, using the calm mind to penetrate the illusions that cause our suffering. Our practice of mindfulness of the breath is the perfect embodiment of this partnership. As we focus on the breath, the mind becomes calm and concentrated. This is samatha. Then, with this calm mind, we can notice the impermanent, fleeting nature of the breath itself and of the thoughts and feelings that arise and pass away in the background. This is vipassana. Together, they are the complete package for mental cultivation, the power to calm the mind, and the wisdom to free it. For those who may be skeptical, it is worth noting that the benefits of these ancient practices are no longer just the domain of spiritual texts. In recent decades, modern neuroscience has begun to validate what meditators have known for centuries. Using advanced imaging technology, scientists have discovered that regular meditation can literally change the structure and function of the brain. The practice has been shown to reduce levels of the stress hormone, cortisol, lower blood pressure, and even boost the immune system. It demonstrably thickens the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for higher-order functions like emotional regulation, concentration, and wise decision-making. Simultaneously, it has been shown to shrink the amygdala, the brain's fear and anxiety center, making us less reactive to threats. This phenomenon, known as neuroplasticity, confirms that our brains are not fixed. Through the intentional training of meditation, we can actively rewire our own neurology for greater happiness, resilience, and peace. If you are inspired to begin this cultivation, the key is to start with gentleness and realistic expectations. The biggest mistake beginners make is trying to do too much, too soon. You do not need to sit for an hour. Start with just 5 or 10 minutes a day. The most important factor is consistency. It is far more effective to practice for 10 minutes every single day than for an hour once a week. Consistency is what builds the new neural pathways. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed and a regular time of day to create a sense of ritual. And above all, be kind to yourself. Remember that there is no such thing as a bad meditation. If you spend the entire 10 minutes lost in thought, and you notice this fact even once, that session was a success. The practice is in the noticing and the gentle returning. The only bad meditation is the one you don't do. This formal, dedicated time we set aside for sitting is our training ground. It is the gym where we build our mental and spiritual strength. But the true purpose of this training is not to become a good meditator. The purpose of sitting on the cushion is to fundamentally change the way we live when we are off the cushion. The real test of our practice is not the peace we find in a quiet room, but the peace and clarity we can bring to our chaotic, busy, and unpredictable daily lives. How do we take the wisdom cultivated in silence and weave it into the fabric of our every action? This brings us to the next essential step, the practice of meditation in action. We have established the formal practice of meditation as our gymnasium, the dedicated space where we train the mind and cultivate the heart. We sit in stillness, we follow the breath, and we develop the crucial muscles of concentration and insight. But the true purpose of this training is not to become an expert at sitting on a cushion in a quiet room. The goal is to bring the strength, clarity, and compassion we cultivate in the gym out into the messy, beautiful, and unpredictable arena of our daily lives. The ultimate practice is to dissolve the boundary between our meditation self and our everyday self, so that our entire life becomes a seamless flow of mindful awareness. This is the art of meditation in action. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly captures this essential teaching. A curious student asks a great Zen master, "Venerable sir, what did you do before you were enlightened?" The master replies, "I chopped wood and I carried water." The student, hoping to learn the secret to some transcendent state, then asks, "And what do you do now, after you are enlightened?" The master smiles and gives the same reply, "I chop wood and I carry water." The student is bewildered. Then what is the difference? What has changed? The master explains, "Before I was enlightened, when I was chopping wood, my mind was thinking about carrying water. And when I was carrying water, my mind was busy planning my next meal. Now, when I am chopping wood, I am simply and completely chopping wood. When I am carrying water, I am just carrying water." This simple story holds the key. Awakening is not about escaping the ordinary activities of life, but about learning to be fully present for them. It is the transformation of our relationship to the mundane. Any activity, no matter how simple or repetitive, can become a profound meditation practice if we bring our full, non-judgmental awareness to it. We can learn to find the sacred in the ordinary. Let us explore how to weave this practice into the fabric of our day. We can begin with one of our most common activities, walking. We spend so much of our lives walking from one place to another, but we are rarely ever present for the walk itself. Our bodies are moving, but our minds are lost somewhere else in the past, in the future, in our phones. Walking meditation is the simple art of bringing our attention back to the direct, physical experience of walking. You do not need a special path or a slow, exaggerated pace, though that can be helpful when you are first learning. You can practice this walking from your office to the break room, or from your car to your front door. The invitation is to shift your focus from the destination to the journey itself. Feel the sensation of your foot lifting from the ground. Feel your legs swinging through the air. Feel the heel making contact with the pavement. The sensation of the weight rolling through the sole of your foot, to the ball, and then to the toes as you push off for the next step. You can synchronize your breath with your steps. You are not trying to get anywhere. You are simply arriving, again and again, with each step, in the present moment. We can bring the same quality of attention to the act of eating. For many of us, meals are rushed, distracted affairs, eaten in front of a screen or while standing over the kitchen sink. Mindful eating is a radical act of slowing down and savoring. It begins before the first bite, by taking a moment to look at the food on your plate. Notice its colors, its shapes, its textures. Take a moment to feel gratitude for the earth that produced it, for the sun and the rain, and for all the hands that brought it to your table. As you take the first bite, do so consciously. Put your fork down, chew slowly, perhaps 30 or 40 times, far more than you normally would. Try to detect all the different flavors and sensations as they unfold in your mouth. You will be astonished at how much you have been missing. This practice not only deepens our appreciation for our food, but it also fosters a healthier and more intuitive relationship with our bodies. We can even practice meditation with our ears. Find a quiet place to sit for a few minutes and simply open your awareness to the world of sound. This is not about focusing on any one sound, but about allowing the entire soundscape to wash over you without judgment. You might notice the hum of a refrigerator, the distant rumble of traffic, the chirping of a bird outside your window, the sound of your own breathing. Your job is not to label them as pleasant or annoying. Your job is simply to receive them as pure sensory information, as vibrations in the air. This practice can be profoundly grounding, connecting us to our environment and calming the internal chatter of the mind by shifting the focus outward. By peppering our day with these moments of informal practice, 1 mindful breath here, 3 mindful steps there, 1 mindful sip of tea, all begin to close the gap between our two selves. The peace and clarity we touch upon during our formal sitting practice no longer feel like a distant memory accessible only in a quiet room. It becomes a resource we can tap into at any time. When a difficult emotion arises at work, we are more likely to notice it before it hijacks us, because we have been practicing noticing all day long. When we are speaking with a loved one, we are more likely to offer them the gift of our full presence, because we have been practicing deep, attentive listening to the world around us. This is what it means to live a contemplative life in action. It is not about withdrawing from the world, but about engaging with it more fully, more intimately, and with greater wisdom. It is a shift from a life lived on unconscious autopilot to a life lived with purpose and intention. Each mindful moment becomes a quiet act of rebellion against the culture of distraction. Each time we return our awareness to the simple reality of the present, we are strengthening our capacity for peace. We discover that the experience of chopping wood or carrying water, of washing a dish or answering an email, can be just as profound and liberating as an hour of silent meditation if it is infused with the same quality of presence. This commitment to being fully present for our life, however, means being present for all of it. This includes not just the neutral or pleasant experiences, but also the challenging and difficult ones. It means being present for the full range of sensations that arise within our own bodies. What happens when the sensation is not the pleasant warmth of a cup of tea, but the sharp, insistent, and unwelcome sensation of physical pain? How can we bring this same radical, open awareness to our direct experience of bodily discomfort? To answer this, we must now learn how to turn towards, rather than away from, our pain, and to befriend the very sensations we have spent our lives trying to escape. We have learned to bring the quiet clarity of our formal meditation practice into the activity of our daily lives. We have discovered that any moment while walking, eating, or listening can become a doorway to presence. This commitment to living with awareness means being present for the whole of our experience, not just the parts we find pleasant or neutral. It means we must also learn to be present for one of the most challenging territories of human life, the direct experience of physical pain. For many, this is the final frontier of practice, the place where our resistance is strongest and our suffering most acute. But it is here that the power of mindfulness can offer its most profound form of healing. To approach this sensitive topic, we must once again return to the essential wisdom of the second arrow. As we have learned, the first arrow is the unavoidable, painful event. The second arrow is our own mental and emotional reaction, the self-inflicted wound that turns pain into suffering. Nowhere is this distinction more critical than in our relationship with bodily pain. The first arrow is the raw, physical sensation itself, the throb in your temple, the ache in your lower back, the sharp sting of a joint. This is clean pain. It is simply sensory information being relayed by your nervous system. The second, third, and fourth arrows are the mental firestorm we unleash upon ourselves in response. It is the voice in our head that screams, "I hate this. I can't stand this feeling." It is the fear that whispers, "What if this never goes away? What if it's something serious?" It is the despair that concludes, "This pain has ruined my life. My body has betrayed me." It is this layer of resistance, fear, catastrophizing, and self-pity that transforms a manageable physical sensation into an agonizing and all-consuming experience of suffering. We take the clean pain of the first arrow and we smear it with the dirty suffering of our own mind. The path of mindfulness offers a radical and counterintuitive approach. Our lifelong conditioning has taught us to do one of three things with pain: ignore it, distract ourselves from it, or brace against it with tension and hatred. The mindful approach is to do the opposite, to gently, carefully, and courageously turn towards the sensation and get to know it. This is not a masochistic act of wallowing in pain. It is the courageous act of a scientist or a detective, shifting our role from being the victim of the pain to being the curious observer of the sensation. The practice is one of careful, non-judgmental investigation. Let's say you have a persistent pain in your shoulder. Instead of immediately labeling it "my bad shoulder" and launching into the usual story of frustration, you can pause. You can take a few calming breaths, establishing your anchor. Then, you can bring your awareness, like a gentle, focused spotlight, to the area of discomfort. And you can begin to ask a series of neutral, curious questions. Where, exactly, are the sensations located? Can I feel the outer edges of the sensation? Is the border sharp, or does it fade out gradually? Then, you can deconstruct the single, loaded label of pain into its raw sensory components. Is the sensation hot or cool? Is it tingling, vibrating, or numb? Is it a sharp, stabbing feeling, or a dull, heavy ache? Is it a constant, steady sensation, or does it pulse, throb, and change in intensity? Simply by asking these questions, you are already changing your relationship to the experience. You are moving from reactive hatred to objective observation. As you watch the sensation with this steady, curious attention, you may notice something remarkable. You may discover that what you call pain is not a solid, unchanging, monolithic entity. It is, in fact, a dynamic, shimmering, and impermanent field of ever-changing sensations. It is anicca. It gets stronger, it gets weaker, it shifts, it moves. Seeing its transient nature directly reduces your fear of it. You realize you are not trapped in a solid block of pain, but are simply witnessing a temporary, flowing process. Imagine observing a bonfire. You can stand at a safe and respectful distance, feeling its warmth and watching the dance of the flames. You can notice its colors, its sounds, and its power without being harmed by it. This is what it means to be mindful of pain. You are observing the fire of the raw sensation from the safe distance of your awareness. The alternative, our habitual reaction, is to mentally stick our hand right into the fire. This is when we identify with the pain and get lost in the second arrow thoughts of "I hate this. This is unbearable." That is what causes the real burn of suffering. The practice is to learn how to feel the warmth without getting burned. It is vital to approach this practice with realistic expectations. The goal of befriending pain is not necessarily to make the pain go away, although this can sometimes happen as a wonderful side effect when we release the physical tension caused by our mental resistance. For those with chronic conditions, the first arrow of sensation may remain. The primary goal of this practice is to uncouple the first arrow from the second. It is to learn how to experience the clean pain without adding the layers of mental suffering. By letting go of the resistance, the fear, and the catastrophic stories, you can reduce your overall suffering dramatically, even while the physical sensation continues. This is a profound and liberating form of healing. It is discovering that you can find peace even in the presence of pain. It is the ultimate testament to the power of the human mind to find freedom within the conditions of its life, rather than only by escaping them. Through this entire journey, we have learned to bring this quality of mindful presence to every corner of our existence. We have learned to observe our thoughts, to speak with kindness, to work with integrity, and even to meet our own physical pain with a wise and compassionate attention. We have assembled a complete toolkit for navigating the rich and complex terrain of a human life. We are now ready to bring all of these threads together, to return to the questions that began our journey, the struggle for restful sleep, and the search for a genuine optimism, to see how this entire path provides a deep, holistic, and lasting solution. We have now traveled a long and winding path together, from the dark, restless hours of the night, through the inner workings of the mind, and into the radiant landscapes of the heart. We have gathered a rich collection of tools, insights, and practices. It is time now to bring all of these threads together, to return to the very problems that set us on this journey, the search for restful sleep and the yearning for a genuine, resilient optimism, to see how this entire path offers a profound and holistic solution. Let us first address the elusive quest for sleep. For anyone who has struggled with insomnia, there is a painful paradox. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more awake you become. Trying is an act of striving, of tension, of effort. It is the mind's desperate attempt to control an outcome. But sleep, by its very nature, is an act of surrender. It is a profound letting go. You cannot force yourself to surrender. You can only create the conditions in which surrender happens naturally. The entire path we have explored is the art of creating these very conditions. The thoughts that keep us awake are the frantic chatter of the monkey mind, swinging from the past to the future. Our practice of mindfulness, anchored by the breath, is the art of taming this monkey, of gently inviting it to rest in the present moment. The anxiety that tightens our chest is fueled by the second arrows of fear and catastrophizing. Our practice of seeing things as they are, without adding these layers of fearful story, allows this tension to dissolve. The struggle against our own wakefulness is a war with reality. The practice of acceptance teaches us to lay down our arms, to be with the reality of being awake without resistance, which paradoxically is what allows the body and mind to finally relax and to rest. Restful sleep is not a prize to be won through struggle. It is the natural state of a mind that is no longer at war with itself. It is the quiet that descends when we finally stop fighting and allow ourselves to simply be. Similarly, let us re-examine our search for optimism. Many of us chase a fragile, superficial optimism. It is the belief that if we just ignore the negative and force ourselves to look on the bright side, we will be happy. This is like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand. The first storm of real adversity, the first arrow of genuine loss, failure, or pain washes it all away, leaving us disillusioned and cynical. The path of wisdom cultivates a different kind of optimism, one that is deep, resilient, and unshakable. This is not the belief that life will always be pleasant or that bad things will not happen. It is the profound and quiet confidence in our own capacity to meet whatever life brings with grace, wisdom, and an open heart. It is a trust not in external outcomes, but in our own inner resources. This confidence is not based on wishful thinking. It is earned, built piece by piece through the very practices we have been exploring. We develop confidence in our ability to handle pain because we have learned to feel the first arrow without firing the second. We develop confidence in our relationships because we are learning to practice right speech and cultivate loving kindness. We develop confidence in our own minds because we know we have a reliable anchor in the breath, a safe harbor we can return to in any storm. This is the optimism of the skilled sailor, who does not expect the sea to always be calm, but trusts in their ability to skillfully navigate the waves. We can understand this entire journey through the simple metaphor of tending a garden. When we first turned our attention inward, we found a mind that was like an untended garden, overgrown with the weeds of anxiety, resentment, greed, and confusion. The first noble truth was the courageous act of simply acknowledging the state of the garden, of seeing the weeds for what they were. The second noble truth was discovering that these weeds were not random, but grew from the seeds of our own craving and clinging, our tanha. Our exploration of wisdom, of anicca and anatta, was like learning the nature of the soil and the weather, understanding the impermanent, uncontrollable, and selfless nature of our own inner ecosystem. Our practice of mindfulness was learning to use our tools. The sharp trowel of our attention allowed us to see each weed clearly. The practice of formal meditation, bhavana, was the dedicated time we set aside each day to do the work. The art of acceptance was learning how to gently pull the weeds without doing violence to the soil. We learned not to fight with the weeds, but to see them, acknowledge them, and let them go. But a healthy garden is not just about removing what is unwanted. It is also about actively planting what is beautiful and nourishing. And so, we learned to plant the seeds of the 4 divine abodhis. We planted the beautiful flower of metta, loving kindness, which wishes for all to be happy. We planted the healing herb of karuna, compassion, which wishes for all to be free from suffering. We planted the delightful flower of mudita, sympathetic joy, which celebrates the happiness of others. And we enriched the very soil of the garden with upekkha, equanimity, the perfect balance that allows all the plants to thrive in any weather. Our practice of ethical living, of right speech and right livelihood, was like building a strong fence around our garden, ensuring that what we cultivate within is protected and that our garden becomes a source of beauty and nourishment for the world around us. Seen in this way, restful sleep and a genuinely optimistic smile are not things we must strive for. They are the natural blossoms that emerge from a well-tended garden. They are the fragrance of a mind that is at peace. The goal of this path is not to reach some far-off, mythical destination. The goal is to learn how to skillfully and compassionately tend to the garden of our own heart and mind, day by day, moment by moment. It is a continuous, lifelong process of cultivation. The peace we seek is not found at the end of the path, but in the quality of attention and care we bring to each step along the way. Let us return, for one last time, to where our journey began, to the quiet darkness of a room at 3 in the morning, and the image of a person lying awake, their mind a relentless storm of worry and fear. The silence of the world outside only amplifying the noise within. Before we embarked on this path together, that person was a prisoner, trapped in a battle against their own thoughts, desperately trying to find an off switch that did not exist. They were a victim of their own mind. Now, picture that same person, in that same room, at that same hour. The storm of thoughts may still arise, the worries about work, the regrets of the past, the fears for the future, but something is profoundly different. They are no longer fighting. They are no longer a prisoner. They have a toolkit. They have an anchor. As the winds of anxiety begin to blow, they know they can turn their attention to the simple, steady rhythm of their own breathing. They can feel the rise and fall of their own abdomen, a safe harbor in any storm. They have learned to see their thoughts not as absolute truths, but as clouds passing through the vast, open sky of their awareness. They can meet their own fear not with more fear, but with a gentle, warming embrace of self-compassion. The external problems of their life may not have vanished, but their internal relationship to them has been transformed. They have moved from being a victim of their mind to becoming a friend to their own heart. This is the central promise of the path we have explored. Peace is not a destination we must travel to, nor is it a prize we are given when all of our problems have been solved. It is not the absence of the storm, but the discovery of a quiet, unshakable center within the storm. It is a skill that can be cultivated, a muscle that can be strengthened, a seed that can be watered. It is a peace that is available to you not in some distant future, but right here, in the simple, profound reality of this present moment. The restful sleep you seek is not a treasure to be hunted, but the natural settling of a mind that has come home to itself. The resilient optimism you yearn for is not a fragile belief that everything will be perfect, but the quiet confidence that you have the inner resources to meet life, in all its beauty and its pain, with grace and wisdom. This entire journey, from understanding, suffering to cultivating a boundless heart, may seem vast and complex, but it begins with a single, gentle step. It begins with the choice, in this very moment, to notice your next breath. That is all. The power to undertake this profound transformation does not lie in any ancient text or with any distant teacher. It resides, and has always resided, within you. It is the simple, radical power of your own awareness. The journey is not about becoming someone new and different. It is about gently clearing away the clouds of confusion so you can awaken to the clear, calm, and compassionate sky of your own true nature, which has been here all along.